Hello, and thank you so much for joining me tonight. We are crocheting and checking out some true crime, which is always very interesting. I don't know. My mom was over, and we talk about crime a lot, so I'm in the mood for true crime. But yeah, what a day! I just spent the last 24 minutes fixing my computer. This thing is hot. It is warm to the touch. Good God. But yeah, no. Anytime I go to do this now, my computer just kind of like craps itself. I gotta figure that out. So that's neat. But yeah, we're here. We're cooking. I am working on my brother-in-law's gift. So we have started it. I actually just started it earlier today because I went to the craft store with my mother to get more yarn. I just didn't have anything fun for him, which was kind of a bummer. All of my colors are very neutral, and I just wanted like a fun color because his is actually going to be this. It is going to be a balloon dog out of crochet. So I'm basically going to send him what's going to look like a chain of sausages, and he is so smart. He's going to figure it out and put it together because I'm not going to do that for him. But yeah, so we have the tail, and we have started on one of the legs, right? And we're just going to keep plugging away at this. I think I should be able to actually get this done within the weekend. Which means I might make another one for someone else, because I am banging out Christmas gifts. I'm nearly out of time, but I have been making spikes for the flail. I did that like last night. I was sitting in bed, unable to sleep, so I was like, let's just make some spikes. So that is coming along. Yeah, we are going to get everything ready to go. So I have all right, our little pattern here, and we have some true crime family annihilators. I was gonna try and find like a documentary, but literally everything is just Chris Watts, and I just don't want to only hear about Chris Watts because it's not like he's the only family annihilator. Like, guys literally do this all the time. Like, not to downplay it, but they fucking do. It's insane how frequently a guy's just like, I don't want to play with you anymore, but no one else can have you, so you shouldn't exist anymore. I'm gonna murder you all. It's crazy. I personally, like, I would love to know more about the psychology behind that, because that's just wild to me. Like, you don't want to be a part of someone's life, you leave. But these guys will have, like, their family that they fucking hate, right? And then they'll have their mistress. But I gotta imagine that, like, okay, even if they did leave and then they got with their mistress, like, maybe eventually I feel like they're just going to resent the mistress as well, right? Because eventually maybe he has a family with her, and then he's like, well, I hate you now too. Like, does the cycle continue? I would love to know. But yeah, we will maybe get into that another time, but let's take a look at some true crime. And I think I don't know, like, I run
right, but
a
back in
bajillion tabs
1985,
all
Jeremy
the time.
Bamber
did exactly that. It's
And
weird behavior like that,
I've
plus some
never had
controversial
an
evidence
issue
that sent him
with
to
running,
prison
like,
for
multiple
life.
tabs
But what if he didn't do it? Let's
and doing
recap.
anything else. So I don't know, maybe it's the streaming aspect. I restarted. I like don't have
Our
anything
story
else on my
begins at
desktop.
3:30 a.m. on August 7th,
And I need to
1985.
remember
Jeremy
to
Bamber
let
is
this
on the
hover.
phone with his panic
No.
father, Neville. The last thing Dad
like
says
this?
is Sheila has gone berserk
Oh, it
with a
is some
gun.
random guy.
By
I don't know
4
who this
a.m.,
is.
squad cars are racing toward the White House farm near Essex, England.
Okay, we're just
Jeremy
gonna
follows
find out.
close
We're gonna fuck around and
behind.
find
When
out.
they get there,
I'm gonna
police
keep
swear
doing
they
single
see a
crochets.
shadow in the window. They order whoever it is outside,
Teeny
but
tiny
nobody comes out. They hang back with
crochets.
Jeremy and wait for backup to show, and at this point, Jeremy makes a confession. He was hunting yesterday and accidentally left his father's loaded rifle on the kitchen table. An hour later, the backup finally comes. They surround the scene, and for 2.5 more hours, they wait for someone, anyone, to come out of the house. Nobody does. On the bullhorn, they yell, "Sheila," that's Jeremy's adopted sister, "Sheila, come out with your hands up."
I like that
But
name.
she doesn't answer. All they can hear is the family dog barking inside. Finally, around 7:30 a.m., officers decide to go in. All the windows are closed and the doors locked. They use a sledgehammer to break in through the kitchen and immediately step into a gruesome scene. 61-year-old Neville Bamber is slumped over a chair on the floor. His pajama pants are pulled down below his knees. It looks like Dad died fighting for the gun. He's got wounds on his arms and torso. In the master bedroom, they find 61-year-old June Bamber face down on the floor. Her nightgown covered in blood. She's been shot once through the eyes, 6 times through the head, neck, and chest. In the same bedroom, police find Crispy, the family dog, hiding under the bed. If only Crispy could talk, there wouldn't be any doubt about who did what to who that day. On the other side of the bed is Sheila, on her back with her father's rifle on her chest. Her finger is on the trigger. The barrel is pointed at her chin. She died from a fatal gunshot wound to the mouth and another to her neck. A Bible is open next to her. A verse is underlined in blood. It reads, "Save me from blood guiltiness." Finally, police go to the kids' room. Sheila's 6-year-old twin sons, Nicholas and Daniel, are dead in bed. Between them, they've been shot 8 times. The only surviving member of the Bamber family is Jeremy. He's a wreck when he hears the news, wailing, crying, throwing up. In other words, he's either genuinely shocked or putting on a good show. Where you fall depends on whether or not you're pro or anti-Jeremy. In this moment, the police are very pro-Jeremy. It looks like an open and shut case. Sheila had a psychotic break and murdered her family before killing herself. All Jeremy is guilty of is leaving the gun out. There's plenty to unpack here, but first you need to hear more about Sheila and her parents. The Bamber family is rich and well known. In their little village, they're practically royalty. As newlyweds, the one thing Neville and June want God to bless them with is children, but June can't have any of her own. Eventually, she and Neville adopt baby Sheila. 4 years later, they adopt baby Jeremy. Fast forward a few years, and Neville is a local magistrate. Not bad for an ex-fighter pilot in the Royal Air Force. Meanwhile, his wife June is a devout Christian who spends her free time in church and doing charity work. On the surface, life looks sweet, but underneath, something sinister is brewing. June's inability to have kids sent her into severe depression and paranoia early on in the marriage. That, plus her strong religious beliefs, makes her a strict mother who sees everything in terms of good and evil. And to June, her 2 adopted kids are basically evil. Sheila gets the worst of it. By 16, her mother is calling her the devil's child. By 17, Sheila has moved an hour or so away to London to work as a model. Everyone calls her Bambi. A few failed pregnancies follow until her twins, Nicholas and Daniel, are born in 1979. By this time, Sheila and their father have split up, and her own mental illness is showing up in alarming ways. At one point, she calls social services, saying she's afraid she might hurt the kids one day. 2 years before the White House Farm murders, Sheila is diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. She tells doctors her sons are evil. She's worried about what she might do to them, but the doc sends her home with antipsychotic medication.
I'm all about
5 months before she dies, she's back in the hospital after a meltdown one afternoon,
and she
hitting the
does
walls
her
and
makeup.
accusing
She's very,
people of trying to kill her. This time,
I don't know.
they prescribe
It feels
her
very
antipsychotics administered via shot once a month by a doctor.
That's why
She
I'm
gets
a
her
big
last
fan of
dose
true
the
crime.
month before the murders. According to the New Yorker,
that
she sweet talks
chapter.
the doctor into giving her only half a dose. Allegedly, the night before the murders, her parents tell her they want to take custody of her sons. As police learn more about Sheila's past, they're even more convinced they're dealing with a murder-suicide. The case is wrapped up, and they get rid of most of the bloody evidence in the house before handing it back to the family to clean up the rest. Jeremy had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I don't like that guy. True crime recaps. I gotta make sure I go back and block that channel. No, thank you. Okay. This guy's okay. He's not my favorite, but he's okay. Oh, oh. Don't shit the bed. Come on, kiddo. You can do it. I believe in you. on, champ. Okay, that one pulled up. Why are you like this? This is literally what took me like 20 minutes. Unbelievable. Okay. Oh my goodness. At least I'm not getting like a million notifications like last time that my frames were like non-existent. So I hope it's halfway decent. That's all I can give you is halfway decent. Sorry. Come on. Why are you like this? No shit. Come on. I understand and wish to proceed. I consent. Oh my god. Please. Take as long as you want. I will never buy YouTube Premium. And I will not disable my ad block. Unethical react. You betcha. Come on. I consent. Viewer discretion is advised. I hear you. I hear you barking, big dog. I do. In the great words of Mike.
Hello, and thanks for coming to my show.
Finally.
If you don't already know, this show is done in themed seasons, and we're on season 18, Killer Kids. If you like this channel, not necessarily
No,
the
not
crimes,
Killer
you can hit
Kids.
like
I
on the
thought this was
video and
Family
subscribe to the channel
Annihilators.
for weekly stories. You can also check out my other channel, Somewhere Sinister.
There it is. Oh god. I was gonna... Do I have to consent to every
The
video? Oh,
Steenkamp
thank
family was
god.
brutally murdered on April 6, 2012.
Genuinely?
People in the area assumed it was a farm attack. Their 15-year-old son was
A
lucky to have
farm
made it out
attack? Oh dear god, come on.
alive, but when the details of his story started not adding up, authorities realized that the killer was closer than they originally thought. This is Monsters.
I didn't want killer kids, I wanted killer parents. I suppose when a child murders their entire family, it is still a family annihilator. And most often a guy. Fine, whatever. I still want to know why they do that. I'm gonna try and find like a better, maybe like a documentary that dives
It
into
was
the
Good Friday
psychological
of
aspects of it.
2012 when the Steenkamp family was attacked. The family lived in the town of Griquastad, the first South African town to be established north of the
Griquastad?
country's Orange River.
Ooh, South
By
Africa.
2011, the town's population was just under 6,500 people. The
And me
news that the
missing
entire
stitches.
family had been wiped out was
Typical.
shocking to the relatively small community, and it became even more shocking when it was revealed that the Steenkamp family had been murdered. Most people who lived in Griquastad had lived there their entire
Griquastad.
lives, and so had their
Griquastad.
parents and grandparents.
Terrible.
Members of the community typically
that like their
spent a
little
lot of time
Germany?
outdoors farming or hunting. And although many regions of South Africa suffered from violent crime, murder
Part of
in
South
Griquastad was
Africa.
rare.
Or maybe it's South
The victims were the
America.
mother and father
I don't
of the
know.
family,
It's, like,
Dion and
crazy how
Christelle
many Nazis
Steenkamp, who were
fled.
both in their 40s,
They just, like,
as well as
established
their
a little
daughter,
Germany. It's all
14-year-old
white.
Martella.
It's crazy.
Dion and Christelle were well-loved members of the local community. Dion was a large man, wearing clothes in the size 5XL,
Whoa,
and he
no
had a
need to
serious
body
demeanor.
shame,
He
bro.
owned a
I'm
total
cool.
of 5 farms and was involved in working on all of them. And he also trained children's teams in a popular equestrian sport called tent pegging. Christelle was also a busy, active member of the community.
Right.
She ran a biscuit-making business
I'm
from the
interested.
farm and
What
also
the fuck
spent
is
a lot of
that?
her spare time helping out the local church. Alongside her own business, Christelle worked as a journalist for the provincial newspaper. At about 7
find that
p.m. on
hobby
April
horse
6,
shit to be hilarious.
2012,
That's the only
15-year-old
equestrian
Dawn Steenkamp
hobbies
pulled
I'm
up in
into.
front of the police
Those
station
kids
near his
can
home.
jump. Holy
Dawn had been
shit.
present on the farm at the time of the attacks and
Broke
showed up at
horse
the
girls.
police
They
station
really went
covered
for
in
it.
blood. A police officer took Dawn into an office, hoping to calm the boy down. While there, he told the officer that the other members of his family had been killed by a stranger who'd been prowling around the property. He had been out in the barn when he heard gunshots ring out from the house. He said that he stayed in the barn hiding for about 15 minutes, but it remained quiet, so he ran into the house. There, he saw his mother, father, and sister had been shot, and there was blood everywhere. He said Martella was still alive, and he tried to pick her up, but she died in his arms. He went on to say that he got into his father's truck in order to go get help, and as he was driving away, he heard more shots come from the house. As he got to the gate to the property, he saw a rifle and a revolver on the ground, so he stopped and put them in the truck. He then stopped on the property to warn some of the farm workers before continuing on towards the police station. When the police left to investigate the scene, Don washed the blood off his hands and face in the police station courtyard. Henrietta Truder, who managed the restaurant across the road from the station, had been sitting outside drinking a coffee when Dawn arrived, and she had seen the boy run inside in a state of distress. After getting permission from the police, Henrietta came into the police station courtyard to give the boy a drink of water, hoping to calm him down. Dawn explained to her that his whole family had been killed, and he was the only survivor. Henrietta noticed that there was a speck of blood behind Dawn's ear, and she wiped it away for him. She was aware that, if what Dawn said was true, he shouldn't wash the blood off his body before being examined for evidence by a forensic unit. However, she felt sorry for the boy who she believed was traumatized, so she didn't intervene. She asked the officers watching over Dawn if she could take him to a restaurant, stating that it would be a warm place for Dawn
offer to wash his clothes
Dawn had tried to insist that he should accompany the officers back to the scene of the crime, but they refused to allow him to come with them. After cleaning his face, Don then took off his t-shirt, which was covered in a considerable amount of blood. He threw away the t-shirt in a garbage can, remaining shirtless for a period of time while he was taken to Henrietta's restaurant. Throughout that time, Don was busy texting on his cell phone. He asked Henrietta how many friends he should text to let them know about the murder, and she advised that he should not tell anybody before speaking to the police. Despite Don reporting that Martella had still been alive when he had gone inside the house and then died in his arms shortly after, she was unable to be revived. All 3 members of the Steenkamp family had died from their injuries by the time first responders arrived at the farm. After hearing Don's story about the intruder, the police began to believe that they were dealing with a farm murder, also known as a farm attack. In South Africa, a farm attack is a violent crime where farmers are targeted by one or more perpetrators who typically carry out a robbery, during which they might sexually assault household members or even torture and kill the victims. While a farm attack isn't an official legal term, the phenomenon is well known in South Africa, and it was something that the police took very seriously. Dawn also told the police about several potential suspects. A man who had previously worked on the farm had warned his father that the Steenkamp family would be easy targets for a farm attack, and another man had recently argued with Dion over a financial dispute. When the investigators located an abandoned pickup truck that had been left close to the Steenkamp family's farm, they believed that they might have found the attacker's getaway car. However, that was the only piece of evidence that seemed to support the farm attack theory, and it turned out that the pickup truck wasn't connected to the crime at all. Despite initially appearing to be a farm attack, as the investigation continued, the story just didn't add up. Farm attacks were typically carried out by a perpetrator who was a stranger to the victims, but it was clear that the killer of the Steenkamps was very familiar with the layout of the farm and the interior of the house. So familiar, in fact, that it didn't just seem like he staked out the house. It appeared that he had been inside the Steenkamp home before. He knew where the guns and the house keys were kept, and he was able to ambush Dion and Christelle, shooting them before they had a chance to react. When the police arrived at the scene, they noticed that the front door was still chained shut and bolted, making it impossible for an intruder to have gotten into the house through the front door. Meanwhile, the back door which led into the kitchen had been left open. According to Dawn, that was the door that the members of the Steenkamp family usually used to enter and exit the house. However, investigators noticed an immediate issue with the theory that the intruder had snuck into the home through the back door: the dogs. While the police officers were at the scene, the officer tasked with taking a video recording of the crime scene had to retake the video because the Steenkamp family's dogs wouldn't stop barking at him. The dogs had been in the house when the murders occurred, and it would have been impossible for a stranger to sneak inside without alerting the dogs, whose barking would have alerted the Steenkamps. Several friends of the family testified, saying the same thing. Every time they arrived at the house, the dogs would bark. Investigators considered the theory that the intruder had used a window to break into the house, or that he had broken in through the front door and then bolted it before he left. However, there were no signs of forced entry, and all the windows and doors were completely undamaged. The rifle and revolver that Don had brought with him to the police station were determined to have been the murder weapons, which made it hard to believe that Don could have heard more gunshots as he drove away from the house. If the guns had already been discarded at the gate, then they wouldn't have been able to have been fired back at the house. Additionally, the guns that had been used in the attack belonged to the Steenkamp family, and there was no sign that the attacker had supplied his own weapon. While firearms were often stolen during a farm attack, it seemed unlikely that a solo attacker would have attempted to overpower the Steenkamps without bringing at least one weapon with him. He would have had to sneak into the house without alerting anyone, including the dogs, know where the guns were in the house, retrieve them, and then shoot the family. It seemed nearly impossible. On top of that, if the motive of the crime was robbery, the attacker had done a poor job of taking anything of value. Even after all but one of the household members were dead, while some keys and Dion's knife had been taken from the house, the perpetrator had left several wallets and cash behind, and neither of the two vehicles parked outside, which both had keys left in the ignition,
yeah, none of their diamond jewelry was missing.
When police arrived at the farm, they found that the family's safe had been unlocked and left open, with the key still in the keyhole. However, the firearms and large quantity of ammunition inside the safe were still there.
Yep.
The two guns that had been used to shoot the Steenkamps also hadn't been stolen, even though the killer supposedly took the guns with him when he left the house. He had then dumped the weapons on the side of the road by the gate to the farm, where they were easily found by Don. Don stated that, on his way to the police station, he had gotten out of the car and picked up the guns from the side of the road and handed them over to the officers when he arrived. From the moment the news of the deaths hit the media, the case was surrounded by rumors. After the police announced that they were not looking for any further suspects, the rumors began to move away from the theory of a farm attack and instead focused on the members of the Steenkamp family. Some people speculated that Dion had shot his wife and daughter and then taken his own life, but had decided to save the life of his son. Others theorized that the killings were somehow connected to Satanism and that Martella had been involved in the occult, leading her to kill her parents and then herself. The most common theory, one that gained significant traction, was that Don had actually been adopted and his parents had hid it from him. On the day of the murders, he had somehow found out about his adoption, leading him to shoot the rest of his family members in a fit of rage. In almost all cases where a family is annihilated except for one survivor, investigators become suspicious about whether the survivor was the one who committed the crime. The Steenkamp case was no exception. When an autopsy revealed that Martella had been sexually assaulted between 12 and 24 hours prior to her murder, the suspicion that Dawn was the murderer increased. If an unknown assailant had killed the family, it seemed unlikely that he would have waited almost a day to kill Martella after sexually assaulting her. The more likely explanation was that the person who assaulted Martella was somebody she knew, such as her older brother, Don. From the first hours of the investigation, the police had found Don's behavior to be strange. The first time he was driven back to the scene of the crime, sitting in the back of the police car, he had asked the officers something like, "What do I have to do to inherit everything?" The reality was that, as the last surviving member of his family, Don was set to receive a sizable inheritance. The farm and all of his family's assets would belong to him. The inheritance would be about 23 million rand, the equivalent of almost 1.3 million American dollars at the time. During the drive, Don had also bragged about how fast he had driven his father's pickup truck when he was driving to the police station. According to Don's story, he had been in the barn when the first shots were fired, and he had continued to hide there after realizing that there was an intruder killing his family. However, every time he spoke to investigators, he told a different story explaining why he had been in the barn in the first place. At first, Don said that he had gone into the barn to talk to one of his friends on the phone. However, his cell phone records revealed that, while he had tried to call a friend at 5:59 p.m., the friend had never picked up. Next, Don explained that he had gone into the barn because he needed to clean his knife and/or put it away. Finally, he told the police that he had gone into the barn to fix his hunting lamp, or that he had already been in the barn and decided to fix his hunting lamp. Investigators immediately found that difficult to believe. When the police first arrived at the Steenkamp farm, they noticed that the lights inside the house were still on, but the barn lights were switched off. When Don was questioned about that, he explained that he had been repairing the hunting lamp by one of the barn's windows, so he hadn't needed to use a light to see. Despite being able to hear the gunshots, which tipped him off to the fact that his family were being attacked, Don denied that he had heard Martella make any noises while she was being killed. The forensic evidence found at the scene, including bloody fingerprints and blood spatter, suggested that Martella had actually been shot outside and then managed to make her way inside the house. A pool of Martella's blood was found near a tree very close to the barn where Don had been hiding. The police believed it was very likely Martella had screamed during her torture, and it was impossible for Don, hiding so closely in the barn, to have not heard it. It was a small detail of the story, and there was no obvious reason to lie about it, but it became clear that Don didn't want to admit that he heard his sister screaming in pain.
Decrease again.
The police also questioned why Don had hidden in the barn and failed to call emergency services, even though he had his cell phone with him the entire time.
Yeah.
If he had known that a prowler was on the property and then heard gunshots, why would he have not called the police instead of later driving to the police station himself?
Exactly.
Examination of the data revealed that anybody on the farm between 6 and 7 p.m., the time period where the murders had been committed, would have had cell phone coverage. The timeline that Don gave to the police was examined thoroughly, and eventually they found that it was impossible for his version of events to be true. Cell phone records showed that at 6:34 p.m., his mother had still been alive. She had sent a text message to Martella. Don stated that, after hearing the gunshots, he had hidden in the barn for about 15 minutes, making it 6:49 p.m. After that, he somehow managed to go into the house, hold his sister while she died, confirm without a doubt that both of his parents were dead, and then drive 10 kilometers to the police station in a time span of only a few minutes. No matter how fast Don had driven, it would have been impossible for him to do everything he said he did, especially since in one version of his story, he returned to the barn for a period of time after checking on his family. In fact, it seemed unlikely that he had been in the barn at all while the murders were taking place. Early after the murders, investigators had noticed that Don had some strange scratch marks on his neck and throat. They appeared to be claw marks from human fingernails. Colonel Dick DeWall, who's the lead investigator on the case, asked Don where he had gotten the marks from. Strangely, he admitted that the marks were from his sister Martella, but claimed that they were from a fight that the pair had gotten into earlier on the afternoon of April 6th, only a few hours before she was killed. Despite the fight clearly being serious enough to cause physical damage to Don, he told Colonel DeWall that he had no memory of what had caused the argument. A t-shirt belonging to Don, which had been found at the scene of the crime, was also the subject of suspicion. The shirt had been torn in an unusual way, with stretch damage to the fabric around the shoulders, suggesting that someone had held the shirt in both hands and pulled downwards with extreme force. Don explained the damage, saying that when he had left the barn and gone into the house, he had seen Martella, who was seriously wounded but still alive. She had reached out for him and grabbed a hold of his t-shirt, trying to pull him down towards her. A medical expert would later say that it was unlikely that Martella could have had the strength to damage the t-shirt based on Don's story. It was more consistent with Martella struggling for her life before she was fatally injured. Analysis of the shirt revealed that it was covered with Martella's blood, with a pattern of spatter suggesting that Don was close to her when she was shot. If the blood transferred to the shirt just from Don holding her, there wouldn't be the type of spatter that was there. Investigators asked Don why he took that shirt off after his sister died, but before he drove to the police station. He claimed that he was disgusted by the idea of having Martella's blood on him, so he changed his shirt. So, after a stranger had murdered his family, without knowing if that murderer was still in the house, he took the time to go into his bedroom and change his shirt. It seemed more likely that he knew he had all the time in the world because it was he himself who was the murderer. Several of Dawn's shirts were tested for residue from a discharged gun, and 2 tested positive. Further forensic testing revealed that Dawn had handled a firearm shortly before his arrival at the police station. There was absolutely nothing to suggest an intruder had carried out the attacks. Samples of fingerprints and DNA were taken from around the Steenkamp house, as well as on the door of the safe and on the murder weapons. With more than 70 swabs taken, not a single test identified fingerprints or DNA that belonged to anybody but the 3 victims and Dawn. On August 21st, 2012, Dawn Steenkamp was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder as well as defeating the ends of justice for claiming the murders were the result of a farm attack. Those wouldn't be the only charges, though, because the medical examiner had determined that Martella had been sexually assaulted 12 to 24 hours prior to the murder. The ME found an injury to Martella's genitalia that was consistent with forced sexual penetration. That led investigators to believe that Dawn had sexually assaulted his sister, and she was either going to tell their parents or had just told their parents. He killed his family to cover up the sexual assault.
Oh my
From there,
God.
investigators were able to analyze the contents of Dawn's cell phone, a BlackBerry 8520. It was on that device that investigators found a text conversation between Dawn and a friend that had taken place shortly after the murders. The exchange said, "Friend, who do they suspect? Dawn, only me. Friend, are there no other fingerprints? Dawn, no, only mine.
How would there
Friend,
be other
is there no
fingerprints?
other evidence to find someone else? Dawn, no, they're not going to find anyone else." It seemed strange that Dawn already knew that investigators would not find any evidence to place anyone else in the house that evening.
Yeah.
It's almost like he already knew who the killer was. Even after his arrest for the murders of his family, Dawn's name was kept out of the media by a court order. Regardless of what he was suspected to have done, he was still a minor and the court order would only be lifted on his 18th birthday. The media was unable to report that the killer had been related to the Steenkamps because revealing that connection would lead the public to figure out that Dawn was the perpetrator. The courts did reveal more evidence that was being used during the trial, though, and some of that included a timeline of the murders. It's believed that Dawn retrieved the revolver and that Christelle was shot first, with the bullet entering the back of her head, paralyzing her. Martella was then shot in the chest but managed to escape out the back door. It's believed that Dion began charging at Dawn but was shot twice before he could reach him. Dawn then ran outside where he found Martella leaning against the tree by the barn. He shot her once in the face and beat her with a blunt object because it seemed that he may have been out of bullets. He went back inside the house to grab the rifle and Martella was able to crawl back into the house where she was able to reach the telephone. A blood smear on the phone indicated that she was that close to calling for help before collapsing. Then Dawn used the rifle to shoot all 3 of his family members in the head, killing them. After his 2014 trial, 17-year-old Dawn was still unnamed by the media, but he was found guilty of killing his mother, father, and sister, as well as sexually assaulting Martella before her murder, and being dishonest with the police. Northern Cape High Court Judge President Franz Como found that Dawn hadn't committed the crimes in a spontaneous fit of rage. In fact, the murders were clearly premeditated. The judge also believed that the motive was clear. After sexually assaulting his own sister, Dawn had needed a way to prevent his parents from going
The
to
whole,
the authorities.
oh,
The
he
judge
found out
said,
he was
quote,
adopted.
"In my
What the
view,
fuck
the
is
minor,
that
the
bullshit?
torturer, wanted to have sexual intercourse with Martella. When she refused, she was consequently tortured, raped, and murdered to prevent her from reporting it. Her parents, who had been witness to the rape, had to be eliminated. There would be no reason for Martella to inform anyone of the sexual activity if a consensual love relationship existed between her and the accused." In Dawn's own testimony, he told the jury how Martella had died in his arms while declaring that she loved him. After seeing him, she had used the last of her strength to reach out and grab his shirt, causing the stretch damage that had made investigators suspicious. However, Dawn also contradicted himself, saying that he had been repulsed by the sight of Martella's blood and had pushed her away when she tried to grab onto him. Dawn gave that testimony without showing any emotion or remorse.
Whoa.
Later, the judge remarked about Dawn's demeanor in court, saying, quote, "He never appeared flushed, nor did he stumble or trip over his words, even under cross-examination." Despite Dawn remaining calm while telling his version of events, the judge was quick to point out that his story about holding his sister while she died wasn't true. In fact, Martella had died in pain from several gunshot wounds after Dawn had pushed her away when she tried to reach out for him. Martella hadn't just been shot. She had been severely tortured in an attack where it was clear that she fought desperately for her own life, resulting in injuries that were described as gruesome. Because of the extent of her injury, she had likely been too weak to grab Dawn's shirt with the force required to tear it. The only time that she possibly could have grabbed the shirt was prior to being shot or during a struggle with Dawn. The judge asked the jury, quote, "How could the accused be so nauseated by Martella's blood that he pushed her away violently, while she was reaching out to him in her hour of need?" There were very few people who could have sexually assaulted Martella in the 24-hour window of time before she died, causing the injuries to her genitals. The sexual assault had taken place during Martella and Dawn's school holiday in a period of time where there were no other guests at the family's farm. That meant that there were only two suspects who could have assaulted the teenager, Dawn or her father, Dion. With few other options, the defense argued that Dion Steenkamp was the one that had assaulted Martella, trying to disprove the prosecution's theory that Dawn had killed his family to cover up the fact that he had raped his sister. However, it was clear from Dion's injuries that he had been shot by another person, and it was not possible that his death had been self-inflicted.
If he would
Dawn
do
had
that to
also
his
admitted
sister,
early
there
in
must
the
have been
investigation
signs
that
like
he had gotten into
previously.
some kind of physical
There
altercation
must
with
have been.
Martella before she
He'd
died,
probably made her
resulting in
uncomfortable for
deep
a
claw
very long
marks on his
time.
neck, but continued to insist that he couldn't remember what he and his sister had been fighting about. Another contributing factor to Dawn being found guilty was his initial attempts to mislead the police by telling them that he believed his family had been the victims of a farm attack. That had resulted in investigators going on what the judge called a wild goose chase instead of focusing their attention on people who personally knew the Steenkamps. Judge President Como believed that Dawn had deliberately tried to make the crime seem like a farm attack by opening the safe and dumping the guns on the side of the road, but because he was only 15 and had no experience with law enforcement, he hadn't been able to create a believable story. Despite killing 3 people in cold blood because he was a minor both at the time of the crimes and during his trial, Dawn only received a sentence of 20 years. When he heard the guilty verdict, he showed no signs of any emotion. With a straight face, he hugged the surviving members of his family before being transported to Kimberly Correctional Center's youth detention facility. If he had gotten away with his family's murders, he would have been the recipient of a sizable inheritance. Instead, he was labeled in the media as the boy who raped his sister and sentenced to spend the rest of his young adult life behind bars. During the trial, Judge President Como was asked by the media about whether the perpetrator's identity would be published before judgment was delivered. He responded that it would not be, but added, quote, "The horse has now bolted. What happens after I have given judgment as of now is none of my concern as presiding judicial officer in this case." At the time of sentencing, it was 2 days until Dawn Steenkamp's 18th birthday. After that point, he would be named in the media.
Okay.
Before handing down his sentence, the judge told him, quote, "In 2 days you are a man. Now be a man." Family annihilators are one of the worst monsters in the stories I cover because their goal is to destroy an entire family, leaving only themselves in the wake of a tragedy. It's the ultimate act of narcissism, and for someone like Dawn, who will be a free man in the not-too-distant future, they're unlikely to move on and not destroy more lives.
Wait, he will be free in the future? Did he say what the sentencing was? I don't even think I heard him say what he was being sentenced to. He's gonna be free in the not-so-distant future? That's fucked. Where's the justice?
If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave us a comment. You can check out our other show, Somewhere Sinister, on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.
Yeah, it's a hard no for me, buddy.
On the morning after Halloween of 1975, Cedar Falls, Iowa would have been alive with people harvesting crops for the fall season. That was, with the exception of 600 acres of corn that were sitting unpicked on the farm of the Mark family. The farm had been in the family for decades, and a neighbor noticed that it was too quiet that morning. Someone should have been in the field and the corn dryer should have been running, but nobody was around and the power to the farm had been shut off. Inside the farmhouse, it was discovered that the entire family had been murdered, including the couple's 2 young children. Nobody in the area had any idea who would have wanted such a beloved family dead, and it wasn't until authorities started looking outside of the state that they came up with a suspect. This
Really?
is Monsters.
Maybe out-of-state family wanted the land to rent it out, take the money. I don't know. I have no idea how farming works. Who knows how much profit can be in there.
In May of 1975, Wayne Mark was preparing to begin chemotherapy. His cancer was terminal, but the chemo might give him a few more months, maybe even years.
Damn.
He was only just entering his 60s, and he'd beaten cancer before, so despite the doctor's certainty that he was nearing the end, some of his family were even hoping for a miracle. Some of his children and grandchildren had moved away by then, and he was reaching out to let everybody know. He and his wife Dorothy had 4 sons. Richard, the eldest, had lived up in Canada and had become a minister. Jerry, the second oldest, had ended up in California, and though he graduated from law school, he was going through a bit of a carefree hippie phase. He had given Wayne 2 granddaughters that he loved dearly. His younger 2 sons, Tom and Leslie, still lived near Cedar Falls, Iowa, just a short drive from Wayne and Dorothy.
He's at the hippie
Tom
in
had been a
California.
charismatic and creative boy growing up, but had developed schizophrenia in his 20s and was deteriorating. Wayne still found himself very much in the caregiver role as the family was having to make decisions on if Tom needed to be institutionalized. Les, on the other hand, was taking on more responsibility and even helping out with Tom as Wayne's health declined. Les had given Wayne and Dorothy 2 grandchildren, 5-year-old Julie and 1-year-old Jeff. Les had made Wayne proud, and he and his wife Georgine were even preparing to take over the family business. Wayne had initially thought Jerry might be the one to take over when he got too old, since when he was young, Jerry loved helping out around the farm. As he grew up, he'd even helped with planning new land additions. He'd been the one to convince his father to give Les a chance in the family business and persuaded him to let Les buy a serious stake before he had a lot of that experience. But as Jerry got older, he became a bit flighty in what he wanted. He'd help out on the farm a bit, but he always slept in later or stopped work earlier than Wayne and Les.
That's your only
so Wayne
option as
began
a
preparing
kid.
Les to take over, and Jerry found his own path. Jerry's path had taken him to Berkeley, California, and he was working odd jobs and struggling to make ends meet. Wayne wanted to see his granddaughters before he started chemo and became too sick to have fun with them, so he paid for plane tickets for Jerry and the girls. Jerry was divorcing his wife Rebecca by then, but had already found a new girlfriend before the divorce was finalized, which his family did not quite approve of. They didn't buy his girlfriend a plane ticket, but when Jerry got her her own, they didn't object. Her name was Marilyn Sue Forrest, and she went by Mimi. The visit was tense. Wayne wanted to get some things squared away in his will before he got too sick, so the family spent a lot of time discussing the farm, the family real estate business, and generally who would get what. At one point, there was a serious argument, and everyone who later talked about the argument would give a slightly different account of what had happened. Jerry would later claim that the argument was all about Tom. Tom had been able to do factory work or odd jobs on and off since his illness hit, but that year he'd started spiraling. He was living in a hotel, spending all of his money getting drunk at the bar, and would periodically forget to put gas in his car and then just walk away, leaving it on the side of the road to get ticketed.
What?
The family was leaning toward having Tom institutionalized, but Jerry wanted to try and find out if they could cure him. He suggested trying some experimental and rather expensive treatments, but didn't seem to quite grasp that those treatments might not work. In his will, Wayne had set aside an equal cash amount for each brother, and Jerry thought it was unfair that Tom didn't have more set aside due to his illness.
Okay.
Les did not want to hear it and thought everything should be equal. Plus, he was already helping to take care of Tom anyway, and Jerry was just trying to make decisions without actually doing anything.
Yeah.
Dorothy later said, quote, "They both
What a
yelled at
mess.
each other, but Les yelled the loudest. It was one of the few times that Les yelled the loudest." Alga Forrest, Mimi's ex-husband, gave the most controversial account of that argument. Many people would later quote his version of events, but it's worth noting that he and Jerry had good reason to hate each other. Alga and Jerry had been friends for a time. Jerry had moved next door to Alga and Mimi when he and his ex-wife Rebecca first moved out to California in 1974. The couples became fast friends. Then Jerry told Rebecca it was over. He was done with their marriage.
Whoa.
Less than a month later, Mimi told Alga the same thing and didn't really offer him an explanation. Then, Jerry and Mimi got an apartment together before either divorce was finalized,
No,
and Alga
that's so
eventually
shitty.
realized what had happened. So, with that backstory
That's so
in mind,
dirty to do to
here's
your
Alga's
friends.
account of that argument. He claimed that Jerry had described it in detail to him when they were still friends. Alga said Jerry seemed bitter about his entire family. He made no mention of the arguments during that visit being about Tom. Rather, he said Jerry was furious that he wasn't being given a stake in the family farm in the will. He said that his father and little brother had screwed him out of the family farm and that he would never forgive them, and even went so far as to say that when Wayne died, he was going to piss on his grave.
Jesus.
A more measured account of that argument was later given by Georgine's father, George Colthurst. He claimed that the argument was also centered around Jerry being bitter that he was being cut out of the family business in the will, which Jerry tried to claim never happened. George said Wayne told Jerry
Yep, you're
that Les
gonna
and
fall and
Georgine
have a
had
bad
spent years
time, bro.
learning the trade of farming and had taken out
Please
a
do not
loan to
jump at my
upgrade the
TV.
family farm. They had a personal stake in the
I put
property
cat
that none of the
TV
other
on for the
brothers had.
boys because it has
Wayne
like
told
birds and
Jerry
games
that he
and
had
shit.
a good education and
Nibs
that he
is
should
pretty
go make
dumb though. I
something
think
of
he might
himself.
lunge at it.
Whatever really transpired, things settled down after Jerry went back to California. Wayne and Dorothy's farm operation was composed of a handful of farms of various sizes.
Oh my god, this is
One of
taking
the smaller
forever.
ones was called Cedar Mark, and it was where Georgine and Les had been living and working to learn the family business. Wayne and Dorothy had been living in the historic family homestead on a slightly larger farm of about 600 acres.
I'm never gonna
Their
do
entire
anything
real
with
estate
single
and farm
crochet
business
ever
was
again.
estimated to be
Not
worth
in a
a
hook
few
this
million
small.
dollars back in 1975.
Fuck no.
It was a huge operation, but they were growing too old to be in charge of it. Additionally, the family house had fallen into a bit of disrepair in their old age. It was the house they'd raised their kids in, and they had a lot of memories
Don't
there.
worry, they can still sell
Dorothy
it for
would
nearly
later
$1
recall that
million,
when her boys
I'm
were in high
sure.
school and college, she would
Needs
wake up in the
extensive
morning
work.
and come downstairs to find various teenagers and college kids letting themselves in for
I'm
breakfast.
mad about the housing
In a
market.
town like that,
Sorry.
everyone gave their friends key copies without a second thought. But with Wayne's health failing, they wanted to move somewhere more manageable, and more than that, they felt Les and Georgine were ready to truly take on the family business. They picked out a house just a few miles north that was smaller but still had a garden for Wayne to work in if he wanted. They moved out in
Ooh, I want a
September, and Les
garden.
and Georgine spent a bit of time fixing up the house before moving into the family home at the beginning of October. Processing the fall harvest so soon after a move was exhausting. Clark Renner, a neighbor who lived nearby, would help out the Mark family in exchange for help on his farm. They'd
That's
dry their
good.
corn together
Very
and lend a
neighborly.
hand when needed. Les's uncle Victor would also help out occasionally in Wayne's absence. The Marks had an excellent support system and knew all of their neighbors well, and in a farming community,
That's
everyone
good.
pulled together
That's
during
actually
harvest.
genuinely so
By
good.
the end of October, they were in the thick of it. Les was hardly sleeping, but glad to be stepping into his father's shoes. Georgine was helping out where she could, focusing on decorating and updating the house, taking a bit of a break from her usual volunteer work to focus on her family. The end of October also brought about some fence mending with the family's personal issues. Les and Jerry had talked a bit over the phone and done whatever apologizing needed to be done about the argument in May, but neither one had been writing as much as they usually did. The two had been inseparable when they were young and had both been best man at each other's weddings, but they'd grown apart in the last few years. On October 27th, Jerry sent Les a letter asking if he would pretend Jerry worked at the farm more recently and in a more involved capacity that he actually had because he was having trouble job hunting. He wanted Les to be a reference for him.
Ooh.
Les responded on the 29th saying he'd help Jerry however he could. He also took the chance to catch up. He told Jerry he'd enjoyed meeting Mimi and he hoped he could meet her again under a less intense visit. He said that Julie was growing up and was as sweet as could be, but that little Jeff had the devil in him and was always up to something. Jeff was getting close to his second birthday, but already seemed to have hit the terrible twos. Les told him that they were settling in after the move and that Dorothy and Wayne were settling into their house as well. He also updated him on Tom, assuring him he was keeping an eye on him and taking care of him. Les said he would make an effort to write more, acknowledging that they hadn't been talking as much as they used to. When Halloween rolled around, Julie wanted to go trick-or-treating, but Les and Georgine were just too exhausted, so they told her they'd throw their own Halloween party. Clark Renner came by to make plans for the next day. Clark had 3,000 acres of his own, and he and Les joked about how they were going to get all the picking done the next day. Clark left and the Marks went to go visit their neighbors Dennis and Barbara Wolf, who gave their kids some candy. That was just after 8 p.m. and they stayed for around an hour. When the family got home, they made some chocolate pudding and spent time with the kids. Victor came to join them, helped out with some late-night work, and wished the kids a happy Halloween. They sent the kids to bed around 10 o'clock, and Victor and Les went out to go pick corn until about 1 a.m. Les said he was going to try to get up at 5 a.m. to keep working. Hours later, Clark Renner tried to get a hold of Les at around 7 a.m. He gave him an hour or so to call back and tried him a few more times, but when Les didn't pick up, he decided to head over and see what was going on. Clark went straight to the corn dryer, but Les wasn't in the barn, and even stranger still, the dryer wasn't running. It was supposed to be running all night. Clark decided that he'd get the dryer situated and then wait for Les to finish whatever he was doing, but he discovered the power to the barn was disconnected, so he went to the family's house to check on them. Clark was planning on going up to the house and yelling outside the window that Les was too busy laying in bed with his wife to help with anything, but when he spotted a broken window, he knew something was wrong. He didn't hear any noise coming from the house either, which was strange. He knew the back door had a spare key nearby, but he didn't want to investigate alone. It looked like someone had just thrown a potted fern from the porch into the kitchen during some Halloween trickery, but he still had a bad feeling. He decided to go check in with Dorothy and Wayne,
really
thinking
Halloween
perhaps the
trickery?
family had gone there since the power was out.
I never vandalized
But Les and
anything
his
as a
family
child
weren't there.
for
Dorothy
Halloween.
decided to
Did
come
I
with
miss
Clark to
out? Did I do
investigate,
it
and
wrong?
Wayne came along too with the plan to wait in the car as he was feeling sick. Dorothy went into the house and called out, but didn't get an answer. During a later interview, Dorothy was asked if she thought anything might have been wrong at that point. To that she responded that they were Midwest farm people and she had no reason to expect anything bad. She found Les and Georgine first. She saw a puddle of blood coming out from behind their bedroom door. She tried to shove the door open, but could only get it open far enough to stick her head in. Georgine had been wearing a light blue nightgown, and Dorothy could clearly see a bullet wound in her chest. She saw Les was bloody as well, but she didn't look as closely at him because she was already feeling sick. She said she didn't see the bullet wounds as clearly on Les, but knew that if someone had been able to shoot Georgine, they would have had to kill Les
harass and assault them
Dorothy
anymore.
told Clark to go downstairs and turn the circuit breaker on, and he said, quote, "Dorothy, what about the kids?"
God, go
Dorothy
eat some
ran
lead
upstairs
paint.
and found Julie, clearly dead. She went to get Clark next before she could bring herself to go into Jeff's room. The phone was working, it was just the power that was out, and Clark called his wife and told her to get over to the farm because Dorothy needed her. She pulled him away from the phone to go check on Jeff. They could see the bullet wounds on Jeff from a distance as well and didn't get too close. It was apparent it was already
Quick, you gotta
too
get
late.
over here and come check
The
it
lights
out.
were still out.
What?
Clark was understandably not thinking clearly and had not yet gone downstairs. They called the sheriff, then went to turn the circuit breaker back on and wait for the authorities. When the breaker was flipped back on, a few lights came on as well as the digital clocks that had all stopped at just after 3 a.m. However, the grandfather clock in the living room had been smashed and the time was stopped at 5 a.m. When police got to the scene, they speculated that the killer might have smashed the clock and changed the time to confuse the timeline of events, not thinking about the digital clocks. Now, I need to take a minute to explain how a digital clock worked in the 70s.
Okay.
It wasn't a digital clock you see today that uses lights to display the time. If the power is shut off for one of those clocks, when the power's turned back on, they just reset to midnight. Before modern digital clocks, the number was either displayed on a wheel that spun around or on plates that would flip as the numbers changed. In that situation, the time would pause where the power went out and then resume from the same spot when the power returned. And that concludes our history lesson on clocks from 50 years ago. Because of the sensitive nature of the scene, forensics did not move the bodies until they'd been at the scene for a few hours, and police who were looking for clues started to float the idea of a murder-suicide. But when they finally moved the bodies and found no gun under less, they switched gears to homicide. They were able to guess what order the family had been killed in. It appeared that the killer had snuck up on Les and Georgine, but they'd woken up before he could shoot them. The first bullet went into the floor and the second grazed Georgine's side. There was evidence of a struggle in the bedroom. Then it looked like Les and Georgine were forced to kneel on the floor and lie face down with pillows over their heads.
Yo, that's
the killer then executed them before going upstairs to kill the children. Julie and Jeff were each shot once in the head and once in the heart.
That's
There was a pillow near the door of Julie's room, indicating she might have heard something and woken up, but she was in her bed when she had been killed. Aside from the broken window and smashed grandfather clock, several drawers had been opened in a poor attempt to make it look as if the killer had broken in to steal something, but nothing was missing. Police guessed the fern on the porch had actually
if you're gonna kill someone for money, you might as well fucking really rob them at that point. You've taken everything else. Like, damn.
There were a few cigarette butts in the basement near the furnace that police were hopeful might have been left by the killer. There was also a cigarette butt in Julie's room. David Dutton, the attorney who handled many of the homicide cases in the area, was at the scene along with every available police officer. The sheriff's reserve was called in, and dozens of people started combing the farmland for clues. A National Guard helicopter flew over the property to film the scene and surrounding land from above. The search for the killer was the most intensive manhunt that had ever happened in all of Black Hawk County, Iowa's history. Police questioned dozens of people the first few days, but felt no closer to establishing a motive. Les and Georgine did not have any enemies. Police searched the farm with metal detectors, hoping to find the murder weapon.
Right?
They had dozens of hits, with almost all ending up being old beer or soda cans. The little evidence they found pointed to someone who'd planned the slayings carefully. Perhaps the most damning clue was an old junction box on the land. Up until a few months prior, that box had controlled the phone lines and electricity for the Mark family home. The killer had cut the lines, which now only went to the neighbor's house. One searcher who was looking near the junction box lost his footing and slipped into a shallow hole in a ditch. When he slipped, he spotted 2 unspent bullets that the killer had likely lost when he slipped into the same hole. 4 miles south of the farm, the killer had also shot 5 bullets into a traffic light at the intersection of Highway 20 and Union Road. Union Road was the road the family lived on. The bullets themselves were very unique, being somewhat antiquated. They were bought and sold very rarely, so police were feeling hopeful they might have found something useful. Within those first few days, given how much the killer knew about the farm, police had to consider the possibility it may have been someone who knew the family, and they started to investigate the other Mark brothers. They ruled out Richard because he lived out of the country. They brought Tom in for questioning, concerned that his mental illness could certainly have made him unstable. But when investigators talked to him, it was immediately clear that he could not have planned something so elaborate. That left Jerry, and authorities found him suspicious because no one had been able to get a hold of him until November 2nd. He'd been on some kind of vague road trip to find himself. Even more concerning, they'd already gotten a call that Jerry was someone they should look into. Mimi's father had called the authorities to say that it was curious that Jerry had had a gun stolen just days before the murder, and that they were having trouble locating him. He didn't outright accuse him, just told investigators they should look into things. Police decided to wait until after the funeral to talk to Jerry. He arrived home in Berkeley on the 2nd, and then he and Mimi flew back to Iowa. The Mark family was laid to rest at Trinity United Methodist Church on November 4th. Les had been only 25 and Georgine 23. Nearly 1,000 people came out to pay their respects. There were so many mourners that they filled the church to capacity, and some people even waited on the nearby streets for a chance to come in and say their goodbyes. Flower bouquets were brought in by over 100 people and spilled out over the coffins.
Jeez.
Richard, the eldest brother, delivered the eulogy. He said their family had been getting phone calls from all across the country from people they didn't even know who wanted to offer condolences and prayers, and that they appreciated them all. Being a minister, Richard had a way with words. He told the crowd, quote, "I like to say something like this. Sainthood begins at death. The gifts and great qualities and joyous moments and significant occasions that you and I share, these are the gifts that sustain us at moments and particularly low points that are on our journey in life." He then went on to talk about those moments. He said that he and Les would spend so much time on the phone together that both their wives would get mad about the phone bills. He talked about Julie being a princess. He talked about Georgine pouring so much care into decorating and fixing up their home. He joked that she would spend the family's food money on flowers if she could. He talked about Les's love for the earth and how he was always planning for the future. A future that would never come, in this life anyway. He also asked people to direct their prayers toward the person responsible for the tragedy, asking that they pray God to be merciful. After the service, the police were finally ready to question Jerry and Mimi. The question of how they had come into possession of a gun that was not registered under either of their names came up first. Apparently, it had to do with Mimi's divorce. Jerry had lucked out, as much as one can in a divorce. He hadn't fought Rebecca for custody of the kids, and when he wanted to visit them, it seemed to go smoothly. She didn't seem to be holding it against him how quickly he'd moved on. Mimi's divorce, on the other hand, was ugly. Alga was fighting her on everything and had even supposedly threatened to kill her.
Jeez.
So she decided to take a camper from their land as it was under both of their names. She and Jerry sorted through the camper for anything Mimi wanted to keep, as Alga was not letting her in the house to get any of her stuff. They also decided to look for anything valuable to sell, as neither of them were doing great financially. They found, among other things, an old Smith & Wesson .38 caliber revolver. Mimi said they took all of her stuff out of the trailer, then they gave it back to Alga, but they did not give him his gun back because he'd threatened Mimi with it. Jerry told investigators he'd put the gun in a storage shed when his daughters came to visit and had largely forgotten about it. Apparently, on October 29th, the same day Jerry left for his mysterious road trip, someone had broken the lock on the storage unit and stolen the gun. The trip itself was also of great interest to the investigators because Jerry had conveniently been unreachable both the day before and after the murders. His version of events went as follows. He'd been wanting to go on a trip to the desert to find himself for quite some time, and he'd just only gotten around to it. Wayne had given him some money to buy a new car, but instead he bought a newer Honda motorcycle that was more equipped to handle long-distance driving in harsher weather than his current bike. He also bought a riding suit to insulate him and a radio. He made those purchases at the beginning of October. While Mimi would back up Jerry's claim that he'd been planning that trip for some time, his friends would only later recall him talking about it a few days before he went. On the newer Honda, he had a California plate, but on his old bike he still had an Iowa plate. Apparently, that plate went missing at the same time as the gun. How convenient. Jerry said he was originally planning on spending the whole trip in the Mojave Desert. He claimed he called Mimi from Coalinga near Bakersfield on the first night of his trip, still in California. He said he found a grassy area to sleep at around 3 a.m. and spent that first night at the edge of the desert. He said he only slept a few hours before a bird chirping by his sleeping bag woke him up, and he was on the road again at 6 a.m. He said he drove up through Vegas on a whim and decided to keep going north all the way to Provo, Utah, just south of Salt Lake City. He called Mimi that night and told her he was having a great time and that he was going on a bit of a longer trip than he'd planned. He was supposed to start heading home the next day, but Mimi told him to keep following the road for a few days if he wanted. She later told investigators she'd never heard him sound so happy and carefree. Jerry said he spent the next night near Chapel, Nebraska, just at
That's
the western
fucked
edge of
up.
the state. Then he decided he'd gone far enough and he turned around. He told authorities that he had driven nearly 10 hours that day. He had a divorce hearing scheduled for November 2nd and needed to be back home. November 1st was when Jerry was originally supposed to be back home, so he tried to call Mimi that morning, but when she didn't pick up, he called her parents, Evelyn and Russell. Evelyn had time to ask where he was and told him to call home, but since neither of them paid the charges, the call dropped.
Oh.
This would have been back when Jerry was calling from a payphone, and a long-distance call would likely have needed additional funds added after a period of time. Jerry had all kinds of reasons for why he supposedly did not get very far from where he started on November 1st. He said he was pulling off at every exit to try and call Mimi to apologize again for missing a Halloween party she was throwing and to find out what Evelyn seemed so worried about. He said his bike was acting up or that he got turned around. He apparently spent most of the day not making much headway getting home, before ending up just 2 hours away in Cheyenne,
once you get on
Wyoming
like
late
the
the
main
next day.
highways, it's a great
That night
system,
he was worn out
motherfucker.
from his journey and making bad
North,
time,
east,
so he
south, and
decided to
west,
try
it
to
ain't that
find
hard.
someone to haul his bike over the mountains so he could rest up a bit. Jerry had back problems and the cold made it worse. During his interview, investigators learned that Jerry's problems stemmed from a particularly harsh beating Wayne had given him as a child that had broken his tailbone. It had never healed
That's
properly,
fucked
causing
up.
lasting pain. Investigators tried to ask Jerry and Mimi both if Jerry still harbored a grudge against his family for that, but he didn't seem to. Mimi only knew about the
I
injury
don't know, if my
because
parent
Jerry had a
beat
lump
me
at the
so
base of
hard
his
it
back
gave me
from
like
it.
lifelong pain.
Investigators never
Yeah, I
really
probably
looked into
wouldn't fucking
Jerry's
talk to them,
childhood
to be
much in
honest.
response to that discovery. 50 years ago, police would not have found such an incident to be that unusual. To get back to Jerry's story, he met a man named Larry Roch on the night of November 1st who was hauling an empty horse trailer to Seattle. He gave Jerry a ride because he'd never been to Seattle before, and Jerry said he could direct him the best way to get over the mountains. Larry took Jerry from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Ogden, Utah before he had to start heading north.
Ayo,
The next
I've
day,
been
Jerry
Ogden.
tried calling in the early afternoon, but once again couldn't reach Mimi.
Spent
Evelyn
some
picked
time
up
in
again and
Og.
gave Jerry the news that Les and his family had been killed. That was when Russell called the authorities, and Jerry made a beeline for home.
Many have I
In
done?
questioning both Jerry and Mimi, investigators were extremely suspicious of their story and asked
Okay,
both of
like
them to
2
take a
more.
polygraph. Mimi agreed as she thought she didn't have anything to hide, but Jerry refused.
Oh,
Though we know today that
Polygraphs
polygraphs
are
are
not
not
admissible in
reliable, back in the
court.
70s, authorities thought it was pretty damning
Yeah.
when Mimi failed her test.
they think that
Jerry
shit's
was
fucking
becoming
magic. They're like,
uncooperative, and police could tell Mimi was nervous and seemed to be hiding something,
Shit's
so they went
fucking
after
fake.
her, arresting her for perjury.
don't talk
Jerry,
to
Wayne,
cops.
and Dorothy were
Ask
all
for a
upset
lawyer
about
and say
that and got the
nothing.
family lawyers on it right away, threatening to sue for wrongful imprisonment. Mimi was kept in jail for 5 days before being released on bond. Then, on November 11th, less than 2 weeks after the murders, the news broke that Jerry Mark was being arrested for killing his brother's family. The consensus in the papers at the time was that there had to have been some kind of horrible mistake. He was always described as soft-spoken and calm. On the surface, at least, Jerry had spent his life dedicated to others. In school, he'd done charity work, and in college, he'd taken a year off to join the Peace Corps.
So?
He'd spent time in Brazil helping impoverished families improve their farms. When he graduated law school, he worked a few different jobs to get his footing before trying to open up his own practice, which was in part dedicated to representing those who could not otherwise afford legal counsel. Sure, his life had gone off the track a bit after that, but even his current hippie phase seemed out of line for someone who would commit murder. No one who knew him could picture Jerry as the kind of monster to kill not only his brother and
I mean,
sister-in-law, but
money
to
is
kill their
a
young
hell of a
children as well.
motivator.
George Colthurst, Georgine's father, did go against the grain, though. He was ready to tell the police what he really thought of Jerry. He said Jerry was serious about becoming a hippie to the point it was concerning. He claimed Jerry had burned his law books and said he would never wear a tie again. He thought the establishment was broken and
It
needed to be
is.
rebuilt.
Yes,
George also tried to
fundamentally.
say that Les and Jerry weren't really all that close, like everyone else had claimed. He said Jerry had always been Dorothy's favorite and Les was Wayne's favorite. He also said that Wayne tried to pit the two brothers against each other to see who is more fit to run the family farm.
Dick.
Jerry was released on bond shortly after his arrest, as his parents
like
were
Wayne was
easily
kind
able
of
to
an
pay
asshole.
the fees. During the months leading up to the trial, Jerry took classes and Mimi moved in with him and his parents. He also proposed to Mimi, telling her he wanted to marry her as soon as her divorce went through. David Dutton, the county attorney who had been at the crime scene on day one, was going to be heading the prosecution, and he tried to put a stop to the marriage. He wanted Mimi to testify for the prosecution, and he thought the marriage was a sham just to keep her off the witness stand. But the local courts overruled him and allowed Mimi and Jerry to get married. They tied the knot on May 6th at Wayne and Dorothy's house just weeks before the trial was set to begin.
You dick.
The trial started on May 24th, 1976, and was held a county over in Woodbury as the case had caught serious media attention, and there were too many people in the immediate area who knew the Mark family.
Especially in a small town.
The ammunition used in the slayings would be an essential piece of evidence as it matched the kind that would be used in Jerry's missing gun. Though investigators had tried to keep the information under wraps, that was the main reason they'd been able to arrest him and charge him so quickly. The bullets were .38 caliber long Colt ammunition, and it was so rare that police were actually able to visit every store that had ever purchased any. It had only been produced in one factory, so police worked their way through stores near Berkeley first, and found a store about 2 hours away in Paso Robles who had sold a box of the ammunition on October 20th.
Oof.
Jack Mikadonsky was working the counter the day detectives came to the store. He'd also been the one working the counter on October 20th, and he remembered that day in detail. He recalled a man coming in to buy a box of ammunition, and he couldn't recall anyone ever requesting that ammunition before, so the purchase had stuck out in his mind. The purchase was actually the first time anyone had ever bought that particular kind of ammo from that store. The man's driver's license identified him as Jerry Allen Mark, and it was an out-of-state license from Iowa. Jack was also from Iowa and made a bit of small talk about their home state as he didn't meet too many people from there who'd moved to California. However, by the time the trial rolled around, Jack said he couldn't remember the man's face enough to be completely sure it had actually been Jerry Mark. But he did recall the man had matched his license photo at the time. Perhaps part of the reason Jack had trouble identifying Jerry is that after he bought the ammunition, he changed his appearance. He'd been up in Paso Robles because that's where Rebecca and the girls were living, and after he bought the bullets, he went to pick up his daughter from preschool. When he got home, he told Rebecca he wanted to get a new look. She helped him shave his beard and cut and style his hair short. He said it was because he wanted to look more professional for job interviews. The prosecution argued that Jerry shaved his beard and cut his hair so it would be less likely he'd be recognized when he went back to Iowa. One of the defense's main arguments was that no one had seen a motorcycle at the scene of the crime, but several people had seen a suspicious blue car that night. Two neighbors testified they saw a blue car parked on the Mark family land away from the house on Halloween night. Wilbur Murray, who lived nearby, also spotted a blue car. He said it was speeding away from the Mark family farm at around 5 a.m. Larry Huffman also confirmed that sighting, saying he spotted the car at the farm just after sunrise. All four witnesses seemed credible and sure of what they had seen. The defense tried to argue that meant police should be looking for a killer who drove a blue car. There was a college party going on nearby that night, so the prosecution argued that the blue car could have been college kids parking somewhere they thought they wouldn't be bothered. In a less convincing argument, the defense tried to pitch the idea that Clark Renner could have been the murderer. They based that on an old argument Clark had had with the Mark family when they had some kind of misunderstanding about a grain transaction. He'd apparently been so upset that he called Victor in the middle of the night and seemed to think whatever had happened may have been Les's fault. Apparently, Clark said he'd kill Les if he ever caught him stealing. That happened sometime in 1974. Clark said that it had not been that serious of an argument and that they'd all apologized and largely forgot about it. The cigarette butts found at the scene matched Jerry's blood type, and they were the type he liked to smoke. But the defense argued that there were dozens of people in the house by the time those were collected into evidence.
I didn't know
Also,
that was
to
a
be fair,
thing.
there was at least one cigarette butt that a deputy admitted to leaving behind in the house, so that was a very valid point. The defense tried to argue that the hair and fingerprints of someone not related to the family were found at the scene, but the Marks were very social people and they had friends over all the time. The defense did not have a lot of evidence to draw on and mostly tried to hammer home the idea of reasonable doubt. Like many cases that rely on only circumstantial evidence, this is the part where I point out that in order for Jerry to not be the killer, a nearly impossible number of coincidences would have had to have happened. The same type of gun that was used in the murder was stolen from him just days before. Someone who looked like him, who had his driver's license, had purchased the exact type of ammunition that had been used in the murders just days before. He also had magically gotten his driver's license back. If someone else had used his ID, why did he still have his ID? A license plate for the state where the murders occurred was stolen from him, making two items related to the crime having been stolen from him at the same time. A monumental coincidence. Someone with his blood type had smoked the cigarettes he liked near the house around the time of the murders. On top of all of that having coincidentally happened, Jerry also went on a road trip where he couldn't be located for days around the time of the murders. This was in the days before cell phones and GPS, but it turns out that it wasn't actually impossible to find out exactly where Jerry had been on his trip. David Dutton had put together an argument that Jerry had lied about nearly every aspect of his road trip and had been in Cedar Falls at the time of the killings, and there was physical evidence on the bike to back that up. The license plate had two screws on each side. Because of the way the motorcycle is set up, one side near the back accumulates significantly more dirt and grease when the chain rubs near it. Jerry's California plate, which he claimed to have never taken off, had one clean screw and one dirty screw on each side, indicating he had taken off and reattached the license plate somewhat recently, and in doing so put the screws back in opposite locations. David argued that was because he'd swapped it out for his Iowa plate to be less conspicuous while in his home state. There was also significant wear near the odometer, indicating it had been taken out partially to temporarily disable it. Using dozens of witnesses, David Dunn put together what he claimed was the real timeline of Jerry's trip. Jerry tried to say that on the morning of November 1st, he'd been no more than 50 miles or so into Nebraska, near Chapel, when he decided to turn around. Donald Shearer is a retired state highway patrolman who runs a store about 100 miles or 160 kilometers east of Chapel, and he claimed he saw Mark in his store on Halloween morning. He remembered everything that happened that day in vivid detail because his son had passed away, and that was the day of his funeral. One man who lived in Chapel did see Mark near the city, but a day before he claimed to have arrived. Jathan Hurd III worked at a truck stop in Williams, Iowa, and he remembered Jerry because he'd snapped at him and been impatient, and also because he'd been traveling late at night at around 4 a.m. Jathan also noticed Jerry had a limp. Numerous witnesses at the funeral had seen Jerry walking around with a limp as well. Two other witnesses who worked at gas stations nearby remembered Jerry simply because the news broke that day about the killings, and everything that happened on November 1st stuck out to them. Those witness accounts weren't perfect, though. Some of them got Jerry's eye color wrong, and others differed on the color of his motorcycle helmet. However, the prosecutor had a smoking gun up his sleeve. Jerry didn't realize that not only can the content of phone calls be recorded, but the location where they were placed can be recorded as well. Investigators had gotten a subpoena for the phone records just one day before they were going to be deleted, and found that for every single phone call Jerry made to Mimi during the trip, he lied about his location. He was smart enough to not make any calls too close to home, but the call the morning of November 1st when he claimed he was recuperating just at the edge of Nebraska showed him 200 miles or 320 kilometers east into the state closer to Iowa.
And what kind of
The
flowers?
actual
Holy
location
crap.
of each phone call showed he had gotten much further east much more quickly than he'd told Mimi. He would have had more than enough time to get to Cedar Falls and to the edge of Nebraska during Halloween on November 1st.
800
At the closing arguments, the defense tried to emphasize witness testimony being unreliable by picking and choosing the extremes of time windows given by witnesses and the police.
Need more deets.
For example, he claimed it would have been impossible for Jerry to get to Aurora, Nebraska, 400 miles or 640 kilometers away by 10 a.m. when the murders were committed at 5 a.m. That was ignoring that detectives said the murders were likely committed closer to 3 a.m., and the Aurora witness had given a time window of several hours. The lawyer also tried to tell the jury that if they had any hesitation at all during the debate, that constituted doubt and that they legally had to declare Jerry innocent. David Dutton objected to that, saying that was not how the law worked, and the judge upheld his objection. During the prosecution's closing arguments, he told the jury the story of Cain and Abel from the Bible. He talked about how Cain was given the task of farming and Abel the task of raising sheep, and how Cain grew jealous of his brother. He felt like Abel had been given the better life and that God appreciated his sacrifices more, so he killed him and tried to hide it. David's closing speech would go on to give the case its nickname, the Cain and Abel murders. Dorothy never wavered, at least publicly, on her son's innocence. Near the end of the trial, she testified that Jerry loved his brother and he couldn't have possibly been the one who killed him. Dorothy was stoic in times of crises, and this was one of the very rare times she shed tears publicly
what did I do?
About the case, as she asked the jury to see her son the way she did. On June 22nd,
I watched this gal on TikTok. She made this incredible dress out of like all flowers connected. It was insane, absolutely insane.
Jerry Mark was found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
They must be pretty small too.
Dorothy gasped when the verdict was read. Jerry remained calm. Georgine's mother, Margaret, went up to the assistant prosecutor and kissed him on the cheek. David Dutton chose not to comment to the media afterward, saying the jury verdict said all that needed to be said. The defense did not comment either, but it was because he hadn't been in court that day. He said he had important business to attend to in Des Moines and was not there to hear the verdict. Jerry kissed Mimi, then kissed his mother on the cheek and said goodbye. Dorothy went to speak with the media on Jerry's behalf and told them that he was planning for the future and hopefully that further appeals might bring about justice. The investigation and trial still remain one of the most prolific cases in Iowa's history. 1 year after the murders, on November 27, 1976, Jerry Mark was granted a supervised release to attend his father's funeral. He was sure that when he went back to prison, it would only be a short while until his appeals went through. None of Jerry's appeals have seen any success, and some were denied before they could even go to court. He's threatened hunger strikes and escape attempts.
Yeah, not very big at all. Oh my gosh. That's gonna be so cute though, and so worth the effort.
To either the DNA on the cigarette butts or strangers' fingerprints in the house. But even if these things were to come back with someone else's DNA or prints, neither of those details is what swayed the jury.
I'm calculating the cost of all my gifts by the hours that they take me. So I'm like, really, everyone's gifts are worth hundreds of dollars.
The bike and the phone records,
because my time is valuable.
To put Jerry behind bars and keep
it's not
him
even
there.
The materials
also,
at this point.
While in prison, Jerry has gone
I only
on
buy
to
them
admit that it was actually him that purchased the 38 caliber ammunition in Paso Robles, but still maintains that he's innocent despite having lied to detectives about that purchase. The purchase of the exact same rare ammunition that was used to kill his brother and his family just days later with the gun he owned that was now missing. Right. In 2011, during one of the many times the media would revisit the case, the Colthurst released a victim impact statement. That hadn't been something done back in the 70s, so they decided to release one after the fact to let the public know just how much they missed Georgine and her family. The statement read in part, quote, "You stole our privilege of being able to watch our grandchildren grow up and enjoy the many activities that they would have participated in. You stole all of the future family get-togethers, the Christmas celebrations, the birthdays and Thanksgivings that we would have enjoyed had they lived. Jerry Mark, you are the lowest of the scum of
robbed
the
him
earth.
of existence.
A statement I feel is fitting for a monster."
I was hoping for more like traditional family annihilators, but I'm settling for this because if I continue searching on YouTube, my computer's gonna crash.
If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on
I wouldn't say I'm a
notifications so you don't miss an
fan of
episode.
true crime,
You can
but
also
I'm
hit like or
fascinated
leave us a
by it.
comment. You can check out our other show, Somewhere Sinister, on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support
Kind of
the
a
show,
tricky
check out our
situation to be a
merchandise at
fan of true
thisismonsters.com.
crime.
The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.
Like, oh yeah, I just love these murders. Oh geez, Fargo.
On March 8, 1976, the police in Bethesda, Maryland were called by a concerned person claiming they hadn't seen their neighbor in some time.
Well, nowhere
The
close.
police sent an officer out to do a welfare check, and once they arrived on the scene, they saw what appeared to be blood on the driveway leading to the front door, which gave them cause to enter the house. Once inside, they found not only blood, but brain matter on the walls and
Ugh.
floor in multiple rooms of the house.
Yuck.
Nobody was in the house at the time, but it was clear that something horrific had happened to the Bishop family. This is Monsters.
One more and then we get to stuff it. Alright.
William Bradford Bishop II was living the American dream, at least on
Oh my
the
gosh,
surface.
this tiny hook is
Brad,
killing
as
my
he preferred to be
hands.
called, played football in high school and fell in love with a cheerleader named Annette Weiss. Though many high school sweetheart relationships don't work out, they stayed together when Brad graduated a year ahead of her. He moved from his hometown of Pasadena, California, all the way across the country to attend Yale University, and the two never
Ooh,
stopped planning
got
their
into
future
Yale,
together.
it's crazy.
Though he'd worked hard to get in, Brad started to struggle a bit in college. His grades were inconsistent, and he was more of a C student. A C student at an Ivy League school, of course, but
Oh,
an underachiever
really?
compared to his peers. In addition
That's
to struggling
crazy.
academically, Brad had
You
a
know
tough
what?
time
I
paying
genuinely
for
didn't
school,
even think about
as he
terms
came
of
from a family that was
services
not nearly
when
as
I
well
put this
off as
on.
many of his
I wonder if
classmates.
it might be too graphic.
His father was a geologist who
Might get in
worked for
trouble.
himself, taking various consulting
We'll see.
jobs in the
We'll
oil
find out.
market of Southern California.
Who-
so the
which
family's
killer?
income was inconsistent. His mother,
I
Lydia
almost
Marilys St.
clicked on
Germain
Chris
Bishop,
Watts,
was a
but it's
housewife,
like-
so the family
I don't
was
know, for
entirely
some reason, it's like
dependent upon
everyone
his
acts
father's
like Chris
business.
Watts was like the
Going
first
into his
family
senior
annihilator.
year,
Dudes have
Yale
been murdering
raised
their
its
entire
tuition
family since the dawn of
considerably,
fucking
and Brad had to
time.
take a year off
God
to work and
forbid a
save
woman
up.
doesn't want to be with
While
you
his
anymore.
classmates all graduated, he dug ditches, then went back in for his final year when most of his friends had already left. Brad's roommate, his senior year,
I'm really
recalled him
excited for my
speaking
brother-in-law to
openly
get a
about
string of
struggling with
sausages.
depression.
Like, I'm
then
not
the
assembling
next
this
day
for
saying
him.
his depression had cleared up. Brad experienced wild
Not
mood
nearly as
swings
graphic.
often.
Peter Scully.
Brad had been born in
I don't think I've heard of
1936, and he'd
him.
been
I'm
too
gonna look
young
into
to
him
serve
later
in World
though.
War II.
I want to
But
find
growing up in
out.
volatile
That sounds
times had
very
inspired him to serve
interesting.
in the military. Shortly after
I
he
hope you
graduated,
stream
he
it.
married Annette, then enlisted the next day. It's also possible his patriotism was inspired by his poor grades, as the
person
Army
who
would be
took
a
the
steady
innocence of
paycheck,
children.
and as a college graduate, he would come in as an
Oh.
officer. As a Yale graduate, Brad was made an
so he
intelligence
buried him
officer
under the
right
floor
away
of
with
his
the
own
Army
house?
Security Agency in 1959. He was already proficient in
Oh my
Spanish,
God, that's
French, and a bit of
crazy.
Italian, and in the Army he started
Peter
learning
Scully,
Serbo-Croatian as well.
gonna
Even
have to
though
look
he
into him.
struggled
That does sound very
academically, he was still
interesting.
very smart and picked up other
I
languages
hope you cover
quickly.
it.
Brad and Annette welcomed their first son as
I don't
Brad
know, something
prepared to
about
ship off,
family
and they named
annihilators,
him
though,
William
like,
Bradley
I want to
Bishop
know the
III.
psychology
They
behind
later
it.
gave
I'm
him
very
the nickname
curious.
Pino, as he would grow up
I
mostly
feel
in
like
Italy.
they do it because
The
they've
bishops were
met
sent to
someone
Verona,
else
Italy.
who
For
they think is
Brad's
like,
first
oh, this is
assignment,
the
he was
one
given the task of
actually.
listening
And
in
so they
on
want to just get rid of
broadcasts
the
and intercepting
family.
military
But what happens
transmissions
when they
coming
start a
from
family with that
Yugoslavia.
one? Like, I
It
feel
was a
like
cushy job, but Brad was
at any
technically
point he
something
would
of a
look at you and be
spy.
like,
What exactly Brad
you're
might
not
have
the
done during
one,
that
and then
time
he'd
is
do
all
it
very
again. I
secretive
feel
and
like they would
vague,
just
but that posting
keep
would mark the start of a
annihilating.
mysterious,
I don't
adventurous,
know.
and ultimately bloody and tragic
I'm also
life.
gonna look into that. I'm
Since
sure
Brad
there's
was
like
an
some
accomplished
psychologist
skier,
who's
he
done
would later
deep
claim the
dives.
military wanted
It's
him
definitely
to
got to be
cozy
like
up with the
partially
Yugoslavian ski team as part
narcissism
of
and
his
some
assignment. The team
insane
would
level
occasionally
of
cross the border and come to
possessiveness.
Italy. Brad was meant to try
And
and
Richard
befriend the players and
Huckle.
attempt to recruit some of
Ooh.
them to spy for America.
That sounds
Yugoslavia was allied with the
interesting.
Soviets in the Cold War, but as a new and volatile country,
I
there
hope
were
you
factions
do.
and groups
I
within
hope
the
you
nation who
do.
opposed that.
Because that just sounds
People who
very,
knew
I don't
Brad
know,
at the time
I
would
like
later
shit
say
like
he
that.
succeeded to some
I
degree
really
in his
do.
spy
It's
mission,
so
while
fucked.
others who knew him only later in life said that Brad himself would claim he'd failed on his mission. There is compelling
what am I
evidence both
doing?
ways.
I
In
decreased,
some
I
letters
stuffed
detailing
it. Okay,
those
I gotta
early
decrease.
years, Brad was
Gosh,
praised
that's
for
my
working
favorite part.
missions
I
of a
love a good
particularly
decrease.
difficult and sensitive nature. Those letters
Just so
also
nice,
hinted
so
that he
few
had been given a
stitches,
great
you know?
deal of responsibility,
Comes
to the
together
point
so
it seemed like
quickly.
excessive and overly specific praise for simply listening
Unless
to radio
I don't do it
broadcasts.
right.
Brad would later also
we go,
claim that
champ.
during that time he worked as a liaison for the CIA base in Germany, which would lend credence to the theories he may have done more boots on the ground spy work. There is
Ooh,
documentation
that's
of him
cool.
occasionally working in Germany
Agent
and being
00,
praised by his superiors for his work there.
007,
But what
isn't
work
it?
he did exactly is vague. Whatever he did in Verona in Germany, he worked on that assignment for 2 years and was awarded a certificate of achievement. But his record wasn't perfect. Brad's coworkers described him as intense and competitive, but carefree in the wrong ways. Apparently, while in Verona, Brad had less than stellar security practices and slacked off on property, locking up documents and making sure
What?
paperwork always went through the proper channels. He also was quick to anger and didn't care who knew it. He left his assignment in 1963 to begin the path to become a Foreign Service officer. His family stayed in Florence so Brad could further study history and the Italian language, and he eventually earned his master's. However, during that time, something rather strange happened.
There was so much
In
counting.
the spring of 1964,
From
just a
Australia
year
and
after he
to
left his assignment spying on Yugoslavia,
countries.
he
Oh
made
my
the bizarre decision to
God.
go on vacation there. His vacation lasted 16 days, and whether or not he took his family with him is
Okay.
unclear.
Need
A
an empty
colleague
stomach
stationed
for that?
nearby reported
Damn.
his concerns right away.
See,
Because
now,
Brad had
now
been
you definitely
spying
have
on
to do it. I'm
Yugoslavia, the
intrigued. I'm
possibility of the
invested. I need
government
to know.
detaining him and trying to keep him to trade for other
Crazy.
spies was very real, and he was
Especially like going to other
reprimanded and written
countries
up
to
for
do
his
it. That's
vacation.
just fucking dirty.
Despite that, he managed to secure a posting as a Foreign Service officer. Brad became a diplomat in 1965. He welcomed his second son, Brent, as he prepared for his new career. His
you named
first
your kid
posting was going to be in
Brent?
Ethiopia, and as they prepared
the
for the move,
worst.
Brad bought a diary
Not
and
even
wrote
for
the
your
opening to Walt
crimes.
Whitman's Song of the Open
Crimes
Road
against
on the first
naming
page.
people.
It's a rather long poem, but the
Guilty.
beginning has both a sense of wanderlust and personal responsibility. Brad seemed excited to begin his adventure. That diary was very nearly lost to history. To skip ahead a bit, it was formally found on March 19th of 2000 when a North Carolina woman named Lorene Klepacki bought an old diary at a flea market.
How
It had
many
been
of these am I
auctioned off at an
doing?
estate sale decades prior. It
3.
covered Brad's life from October
Okay,
of
and I did that.
1965 to October of 1971. Brad's
Ending on
family
row
found a lot that they liked
66.
about Ethiopia.
I was supposed to be
There was
counting
a
all
large
the rows?
diplomatic
No.
community.
How dare you?
Ethiopia
I'm not
was a stable
counting
country
all
at
the
the time, so they
rows.
felt safe.
Dear
Brad was stationed in
pattern.
the capital, and their
Eat
family
me.
enjoyed hosting lavish
gonna make it
parties
up
and
now.
events for politicians from
What
all
you've
over the
done.
globe. The castle-like architecture of Ethiopia was reminiscent of Europe, and Brad was
Richard
especially
Huckle
fond of
is
the
from the
food.
UK.
However, his diary from
Ooh,
those first few years spoke of a
globe-trotting.
troubled
Yeah.
mind.
I love
One
when it's
entry in
not only
1967
Americans who
read,
are
quote,
fucked up pieces of
"Toxic
shit, you know?
degenerative psychotic
Sometimes
with
it feels like
confabulation,
we're
chronic
the
low-level
monsters.
maniac, involutional megalomania."
But it's nice to know
Whatever
other
that entry
countries
meant
are
was unclear, as it was somewhat
disgusting
removed
as well.
from the context around it. But whatever was troubling him, he did seem to
I can't wait to
recognize
find
that
more
something was
out more
wrong and
about
he
them. I'm
wanted to
gonna be
get
looking
better.
them up later.
One entry written that same year read, quote,
Because usually
"I
I'll
am
like
getting better.
stay up
I
for
am
like
on
an
the
hour at
threshold.
least
I
after
recognize
streaming.
now that to
Just to
twist
kind
my
of, I don't
accursed
know, take a
confines, I
break,
must develop a
unwind more.
continuing and constant
I don't know how I
sense of
could get more
surging for
unwound,
confidence,
but here we
awe,
are.
and becoming in love. This is my greatest challenge." After 2 years in Ethiopia, the bishops went back to Italy, this time to a posting in Milan. They took up some of their old hobbies, skiing and tennis, and
just
seemed happy.
yapping.
But those around them noticed they seemed to
I was
live
debating on
above their
switching
means,
to
but only in certain ways.
Scamfish.
Annette had fancy jewelry
Went to the
and furs, and they would go
Philippines,
on
and
lavish
Richard
vacations. But
Proud
their
South.
home was
Oh
sparsely
no!
furnished, except for an eccentric art collection.
No, those are
Strangely
such
enough,
vulnerable
Brad would
communities
often blame
already.
Annette when the
Fuck,
family
that's
was
gonna be
struggling
so
financially. Despite
so
Annette coming from a
terrible.
wealthier family
Shit.
than him, colleagues often noticed him making
There's already
remarks
like a
about how
pit
she
in my
was from
stomach.
the wrong side of the tracks,
Yikes.
or making
Okay.
jabs that she just didn't understand the
Okay.
finer things in life and how to manage money.
Gross.
But whatever trouble was happening in their marriage
I was watching
and
something
personal lives, it
yesterday
seemed
that
to
was
be
talking
largely
about, like,
Brad's fault. He had
up
at
in
least one
Canada, they
affair
have
that
the
Annette
Highway
knew
of
about by
Tears.
then
It's
and was not shy
very
about
similar to
flirting
the
with other
Trail
women
of
on
Tears
business
here in
trips.
America.
He was also slacking off at
But
work.
it's primarily like
Coworkers
minority
remember
and
Brad often skipping work
indigenous
in the
women who go
afternoons to
missing
go play
along that
tennis.
trail.
Brad wrote
And they're just like
sparingly in
never
his
found
diary
because
during
it's
that
such dense
time.
wilderness,
He
and
mentioned
it's
his
just like,
sons a
God,
few
you know, the
times, but
crimes
never
are
mentioned
horrific.
Annette. He wrote a bit about dealing with severe insomnia. He would eventually go to a doctor who prescribed him Serax. That helped a great deal with his insomnia, but he was openly frustrated that he felt the
don't want
medication
none of
made him
that.
sluggish. His diary entries became shorter as the handwriting became more wild. Near the end,
What
he
am I
wrote in
doing
his
now?
diary,
Ooh,
quote,
body, yada,
"I
yada, yada,
cannot
yada, yada,
reconcile
yada,
the
under the
total
body.
absolute indifference of God to me."
Yeah,
He
yeah.
eventually stopped writing in his diary for a long time. The Bishops
Okay,
left
so we
Italy in
got
1870 and went back
2
home
legs
to California. The State
and a
Department was
tail.
putting Brad through school to get another master's
This is
degree,
gonna be like
this
the
time in African
cutest
Studies at UCLA. The
little
State Department needed more
balloon
diplomats
dog.
in Africa,
Oh my
and his
God.
posting in Ethiopia had been successful enough that they had faith in him. In
Kinda looks like a
October
little
of
dick.
1971, shortly after the
Anyways.
birth of his third
I
son,
did this
Jeffrey,
bit, and then I
Brad
started
wrote
doing
one
the
last
rounds,
entry in
and I
his
sent it to my
diary where it
brother-in-law
said,
offering him
quote,
nipple
"Your family
covers.
grows more beautiful.
He didn't
and you
accept
still
my offer,
stand
and I
on
was
the
only going to charge him
threshold.
$20 for a
Outwardly,
pair.
your
That's a
accomplishments
bargain
are
for
great."
nipple covers.
He then proceeded to list some
Fucking
promotions
stingy.
and medals he'd received, but continued
Ungrateful.
on with, quote, "Still you stand on the threshold. You have soared to the heights and plummeted each
gotta
time to the
increase.
depths."
Yuck.
Eventually, Brad earned his degree and started applying for postings.
Earn your
Despite the
degree.
need for more
Set
diplomats in
yourself
Africa,
free.
Brad was having trouble getting another assignment. The more stable parts of Africa, where his family could have more modern amenities, were all going to his colleagues, so eventually he volunteered for what is known as a hardship post. That's a
Ooh.
posting where only the basic survival amenities are available, so signing up for the post showed that he was a hard and adventurous worker. Brad's father
I
had
wanna show
passed
my
away
boss
by
how
that
hard I
point, so his
am.
mother decided to
I'm
move
sorry.
with them as well.
I'm sorry.
So they were a family of
I'm
6
still mad
preparing
about
to go to the
Thursday.
newly formed nation of Botswana at a posting that had
Weird
really only been
fascination
set
with
up to
killers.
sustain
Hey,
one person.
It's
Brad
interesting
was
though,
placed in
like
charge of diplomacy
it
in
really
nearby
is not in like
Lesotho
a
and
sick
Swaziland
way,
as
but
well.
just the
The
psychology
countries were
behind it
relatively
is
small,
very
and the US government
interesting.
didn't see a need to
Like,
give
how
them
do you
their
just
own
do that?
postings. While in
But then they do.
Botswana,
You
Brad
know,
and
there
Annette
they
were
are
both
doing
seeing
it.
therapists
It's
and both
crazy.
struggling.
It's
There was
horrifying.
not much to do, and that posting was more dangerous than their previous ones. They went on a lot of safaris and big game tours to get away from the monotony. But still, Annette was bored and
I think
anxious
it just
and
stems
dealing
from
with frequent
psychology. I
panic
think
attacks.
particularly
Brad
with
tried to be
women,
somewhat productive
like
and took flying
men
lessons during
are
that
the
time.
most likely to kill
However,
us.
he also got
Like,
a herniated
why would
disc
we
and had
not
to
be
fly out of
interested
the
in how
country
they
to get
think?
it treated. That left him with a prominent surgery scar on his back.
It's horrifying.
The Bishops were rotated back to Washington
no
after 2 years in
surprise.
1974. There was an affluent suburb in the woods near Brad's office
Was
called Hard
Richard
Rock Springs, and the
Huckle
Bishops moved in.
working for,
However,
like,
they were
a
only able to
woman
afford the house
who
because
did,
Brad's
like-
mother paid the down payment. The boys enjoyed
No.
living back in the States, and the
No,
older two
that
took
guy
up tennis and
hired
swimming.
someone to
Brad wanted
assassinate
to
his
try
wife.
applying
Never
for more
mind.
overseas
Never mind.
postings, but
I'm
Annette
thinking of
wanted to
something
stay in the
else.
States for a while. Brad and Annette
That wasn't
were
even
hitting
a
the point where
long
they wanted
message,
different things in
Streamlabs.
life.
Don't twist
She
up
was
your
studying to get an
panties.
art degree
Dang.
and wanted to find a life beyond just a diplomat's
Gosh.
wife.
Richard
Brad was
Huckle.
hell-bent on making admiral before the age of 50
I don't
and saw his
think I
career
have,
as his
like-
whole life.
'Cause
Those
the only
close
guy I
to
could
Brad
think of
and
was, like,
Annette noticed tension between the two
a
of
private
them.
security
Annette
officer.
once told Brad's secretary on a visit
For this-
that after 35, a man is no more
I think she was like a
good. Remarks
televangelist.
like that were seldom recorded,
Again,
but
just
likely
leave
not
your
rare,
wife.
coming
You
from
don't
both
have to
sides of the
murder her.
marriage. Once when applying
Okay,
for
he
a
was
credit
doing
card,
missionary
Brad
work,
had
and
to
of
list
course the
Annette's
missionary
job.
work put him
Instead of
in
writing stay-at-home
proximity
mom, he
to
wrote
vulnerable
chief
people and
slave.
communities.
In March of
That's
1976,
fucked.
the yearly promotion
I
list was
hate
going
that
to come out
shit.
for Brad's department, and Brad
Yuck.
desperately needed to be on it. Foreign service
Ooh,
officers operate in a
I'm
strict
gonna
and
Google him
structured way
so hard
modeled
later.
largely after the U.S. Navy.
Shit.
Rather than trying to maintain the same positions, they need to constantly be promoted. If they don't get a promotion every 5 years, ideally more often, they're let go.
Yo, that's so
Brad was just
Navy.
months away from hitting
Hell
5
yeah,
years
my
without a
brother-in-law is
promotion,
like
so
always
the
having
March
to get a
promotion
fucking
list was
promotion. It's
actually his
crazy. I'm
last
like, bro,
chance at staying
chill.
employed. Of course, he could have applied for a hardship posting or even just a less desirable promotion and possibly gotten a second chance that way, but Annette wasn't having it. They had 3 young kids and she was finally making something of herself. 2
I
weeks
thought I
before
had
the list
snacks
came
over
out,
here,
Brad
and I
was
think I
given the
put them
news in
away.
advance that he was not going to
They're
be
up there.
promoted. It was essentially a 2-week to 3-month notice that his career was coming to an end. After he got the news, Brad ran into a colleague, Peter Murphy, and complained about the system.
Also, to no
Peter tried
surprise,
to
Richard
reassure
was
Brad that the promotions
Oh, wait, I
weren't
already read
always
that.
fair and that he was a
Fun
hard worker,
fact!
but Brad was inconsolable. The two
No.
had been chatting at the bus stop, and eventually Peter asked Brad what he was doing
He
in the part of
ceased to
town they were in.
exist. Did he
and Brad
do that
said he
to
was going to see his
himself?
therapist because, quote,
Fucking
my
bet he
job is
did, the
horrible. My
coward.
kids and my mother are driving me crazy. He was still on
71?
Xerox at the time, and his therapist was a
Holy
mysterious
shit.
man named Frank
Leave some
Caprio,
crime
who
for
would
the
later
rest of
refuse to
us.
cooperate with authorities and
What
claimed
the
that he and Brad were
fuck?
good friends, even
That's
outside of a doctor-patient
insane.
relationship. Everything in Brad's life was in chaos, but a lot of it was due to his own choices. His marriage was on the rocks, but over the course of their marriage, Brad
Nope.
had at least 2
Oh.
affairs and was even cheating on
What?
Annette in the spring of
The
1976.
church took him
Whether he
out,
wanted to
didn't they?
leave
They were
her
like,
or simply
gotta
wanted to
go.
have
1, 2,
mistresses is
3,
unclear.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Things weren't
9,
great for
10,
the rest of the
11.
family either. Brad often
Pope
expressed feeling
personally was
embarrassed
like,
about his mother and her
goodbye.
support,
Oh,
but
wait,
at the
no, you
same
said it was
time didn't
Christian.
seem
Never
able to
mind. They ain't
keep
got
the
no
family
Pope.
afloat financially himself. That winter, Lobelia had been helping out, but things were tight. She'd even started trying to sell
That's
her
insane,
favorite fur
though.
coat. In addition to that, the family was being audited by the IRS. The day the promotion list came out, March 1st, was a Monday. There were supposed to be a few other people in the Bishop household that fateful day. A Spanish exchange student named Gabriella, who'd been living with them, just left days before.
Damn.
Jacques D'Amboise,
I'm
a
like,
famous dancer and family friend,
I'm
was supposed
disappointed
to
there's
spend
no
the night with the
justice,
family
but at the
along
same
with his
time
wife,
there
but the
was
two canceled because
kinda
Jacques hurt his
justice,
knee.
you know?
So March 1st began and
Street
ended with the
justice.
Bishop family having the house to themselves.
So,
It was a nice day, so Brad rode his
good
motorcycle
for
to work.
them.
He
You
booked an
know,
appointment
say
that
what
morning
you
to
want,
replace a crown on his
but
tooth,
the fact
so he had a
that
bit of a
even
breather from the
prisoners
office, but it
have
wasn't
like
enough.
their code of
He knew the
conduct.
news was coming, but now all of his coworkers
I
knew
love
he was
that.
basically being fired too.
Like,
He told everyone he was feeling
that's
sick and was going to
crazy.
go home early. His secretary offered to call Annette for him, but he said he'd be okay
Especially
taking
if
his
it was
bike
like
home.
children that he
On the
was
way back, he stopped at an ATM and
was
drained the
targeting, like,
$400 the family had in their savings
that's
account.
crazy.
When
Yeah.
he got
Yeah,
home,
he
it
wouldn't
would have
last
been
long
just
in a
his mother
prison.
there, if anyone. Annette had Jeff enrolled in a kindergarten program that she volunteered at, and the other boys were off at
Alright.
school.
Yeah, I'm gonna be looking him up
Shortly after
later.
he got home, he
And
left
you definitely
again
need
in the
to do the
family
stream.
station
Just
wagon.
do it.
A neighbor who happened to be looking outside thought that was a bit odd, as normally Annette drove the station wagon and Brad had a Volkswagen when he wasn't riding his motorcycle.
What a nosy
He went to
fucking neighbor.
Sears first and bought a mall hammer, which is a bit heavier but also more compact than a framing hammer. Then he swung by a gas station on the way home to fill up a gas can. The next stop was a hardware store in a
shouldn't talk,
nearby
though. I
strip
am a
mall
nosy
where he picked
fucking
up a
neighbor.
shovel and a pickaxe. He got
Like
home
6
around
counts
9
because they
p.m.
couldn't confirm
The
all his
family had all eaten
victims.
dinner, and Pino
Holy
was taking up
shit,
the family
fuck
phone
yeah.
line talking to his
That's
girlfriend.
crazy.
Brad got on the extension and harshly told him to wrap it up and
Or at
go
least
to
he was
bed.
tried.
It seemed that
Like, so much
between
comes
9
out in the
and 10
trial
o'clock, the family was
that, like, when they
preparing to go
plead
to
guilty,
sleep.
it's almost like,
At
dang,
around
I wanted to know
9:30,
all
a
the tea,
neighbor
though.
spotted Lobelia walking the family dog Leo around the block in her beloved fur coat. Annette set up a futon downstairs with her books to study, and the boys all went to bed.
What is happening
The next
here?
day, a neighbor went to visit the family, but
Oh my
found
God.
they'd
What
vanished.
did I do?
They'd often go on last-minute ski trips, but to do so on a Tuesday would be strange. She went into the house through a side door, saw a pot of oatmeal on the stove, and called out, but didn't hear anyone home, so she left. That same morning, the Bishop family station wagon would be spotted 300 miles south in the town of Columbia, North Carolina.
That's like...
The car was spotted at 9:30 and again at 10 by two different witnesses who lived on the outskirts of town. Then, in the early afternoon, a nearby fire watcher spotted smoke in the area and radioed Forest Ranger Ron Brickhouse to investigate. Because the fire was still small, he was able to contain it, and after he put out the blaze, he went to see what had started it. He later said he thought he'd stumbled upon someone burning hog parts, but when he realized he'd stumbled upon a mass human
and a lot
grave,
of times
he
these
called
people
the
have
police.
families too.
Police
It's fucking
didn't know
crazy.
it yet, but they
Like,
found what was left of the Bishop
being
family.
married to someone
the
who would
bodies
just
were buried from youngest to oldest.
do that kind of shit, and then you
Lobelia
find
was
out
laid on
later.
top of
Like,
Annette, with her sons
that is
buried in
actually one of my
descending
biggest
order
fears.
below her, and
Is that like
Jeffrey
I'm
at
gonna
the
marry
bottom of the
someone,
pile.
and then one day I get a
Brad's
call,
body was not amongst
and they're
the
like,
carnage.
your husband won't be coming
A
home
gas
tonight.
can and a
He's being
shovel had simply
detained
been left
for
at
like
the scene,
trying to
and
solicit
investigators
a
could even
minor.
make out
That is
car
one of my
tracks and a
greatest
dog's paw
fears.
prints in the sand,
Because
so they had
I
a lot to
watch,
go
like,
on to
I see it all the
kickstart
time on like
investigation.
Credcatcher, and
The
it's like
town
this
of
old
Columbia
guy and
was
he's got a wife
overrun
at
with
home.
investigators, and police started canvassing the
Ugh,
nearby logging
it's
roads.
horrifying, you
The
know.
coroner would clean up the faces
But
of
I
the
just say I'm
bodies as
afraid of
best he
heights
could after
instead,
the
'cause
autopsy,
you
and
can't say
everyone
that.
but Pino was photographed to send their likenesses to other departments to try to identify them. Pino was not photographed, as his injuries were gruesome enough that his face was not in any way recognizable.
Damn, I'm
The
still
main
nowhere
clue
close to
police had to
24.
go
What
on
the
was a
fuck?
tag still left on the shovel from a hardware store up in Maryland. They drove up to the store and left a flyer there with the faces of the victims. A week after the murders, on March 1st, the Bishop's neighbors called the police. Authorities instantly noticed blood on the driveway leading up to the front door. The neighborhood was spread out with a lot of natural forest left intact, so no one nearby could really see the house from the road, which is why alarms weren't raised sooner. Their next-door neighbor was an occasional babysitter for Jeff, so she lent the police her spare keys to do a wellness check. The house was covered in blood, bone fragments, and brain matter. The kitchen by the side door was mostly untouched, which is why the neighbor who checked on them a week earlier didn't realize what was wrong. When local police started processing the scene, they quickly pieced together what had happened when they saw the flyer in the hardware store for the bodies found down in North Carolina.
That's awful.
The 3 bedrooms upstairs.
That is awful.
And
Was
blood in the master bedroom downstairs. We also have evidence that the homicide of these 5 people took place at this residence, as we have blood that leads from the home out to where the
and it's
parking lot is. This is where we
there
stand
are
right now.
certain
The
communities,
investigators going to
because
North Carolina. They're en route
Scully
now
was prowling in East
to
Asia, or was that the
coordinate efforts of our
Philippines?
department with the,
Let me go back up.
North Carolina law enforcement people.
What about Mr. Bishop?
Mr. Bishop, at this time, we
Yeah,
don't know
okay,
where
so we
Mr.
went to the
Bishop is. He's
Philippines.
missing.
Because there are communities, I was watching this documentary, and there are some communities where they're so poverty stricken that the parents essentially will sell their children into like an indentured servitude to someone who does promise to give them a better life and teach them like a skill and do all that, and then they end up severely abusing them.
Of course, police did briefly consider the possibility
It wasn't like a
that
true
Brad had been
crime
kidnapped
documentary. It
and
was
also the
like a
victim of foul play.
humanitarian
But as the days and weeks wore
documentary
on, the
where it was
evidence
talking
painted
about
a
how
very clear
to
picture of a
serve
man
those
on the
communities
run.
and how
When the coroner's report in North Carolina was put together
Yeah.
with the slaughterhouse in Maryland, investigators
And
were
that's
able to
common
piece
in a lot of
together what
places,
they
especially
thought was
when you
the
do
most
get into,
likely
like,
scenario.
more
They
poverty
determined that Annette was
stricken.
likely killed
That shit
first.
does happen.
A
It's
considerable
legit.
amount of her
That is
blood was on the
horrific.
futon, surrounded
So the
by her
parents think
hooks.
that they're
Her skull had been
giving their
caved in
child
from
their
numerous
best
blows
bet
to the front and
and just
right
handing
side
him
of
over
her
to a
head.
monster.
The
Holy
murder weapon
shit.
appeared to be the hammer Brad had purchased that same day.
That's heavy.
Lobelia had locked
Damn.
herself in the bathroom, but the door frame was cracked and broken in.
Fuck.
She was not beaten to death,
so sad.
rather she was struck once in the head, but it only left a bruise,
I don't like it.
and then she died either of being smothered or of heart failure.
Okay.
Pino had been beaten to death in his bed and didn't appear to have
to
any
do 11
defensive
rows.
wounds, so he
The
had
body's
likely
only
slept through
11
the other
rows.
killings and was taken by surprise. He was only 14, but was approaching 6 feet tall, and
No.
his father may have
Yes.
judged him to be the most capable of putting up a fight. Perhaps that's why
9.
his injuries were so much more gruesome
Oh my
than
God,
the
I'm
rest of the
stupid.
family. But
Bear with
really,
me.
the entire family except Brad's mother was beaten so severely that most of the blows were after they were likely already dead. Brent and
Oh my
Jeff
God,
shared
it
a
is
room
9.
with
I
bunk
can't
beds.
fucking count
Brent
either.
was 10 at the time of his death and slept on the top bunk. The
Christ.
coroner's report included the phrase
It's one thing I didn't think
pulpification
to
of
ask
brain
myself
in
when I
his
started
autopsy
crocheting.
report,
Can I
and there were
count?
hammer marks on the
No,
ceiling
the
from
answer's
the
no.
attack. Jeff was only 5 and beaten just as viciously as the rest of the family. Brad's bloody pajamas were found discarded on a closet shelf, so it appeared as though he'd gotten
Bear with
ready
me.
for
It's like
bed
a
that night as
bajillion
if everything was
degrees.
normal.
I need to open a
then
window.
killed his
I'm, like,
family in his pajamas.
dying.
After that, investigators determined that Brad cleaned himself up and packed a suitcase with clothes and a shaving kit. He then loaded all of the bodies into the station wagon. He covered them with blankets and put Leo in the front seat. Why he spared the dog is anyone's guess, but some have theorized that he kept Leo in the front seat so anyone looking into his car would be distracted by the dog and not look too closely at the poorly covered bodies in the back. By 9 a.m. the next morning, he'd arrived in Columbia, just shy of 12 hours after the murders likely happened. The town is near the Outer Banks and surrounded by sandy forests and old logging land. Brad drove along the logging roads a few miles south of town, and police have pointed out that the logging roads are very easy to get lost on, so he'd likely driven them before. Also, Columbia is across the inlet from Harvey Point, a training facility used by the CIA, FBI, and ATF, which some people have speculated may be relevant. Brad eventually drove to a secluded spot in the woods and tried to dig a grave. He'd brought a saw to cut through any roots, so he'd been prepared to hide the bodies in a forest somewhere, but he hadn't planned for how close he was to the ocean. The soil was mostly sand and just filled back in as he dug. He'd also brought a pickaxe, which didn't seem to get used. At some point in the early afternoon, he had dug a shallow but wide pit and started dragging the bodies over from the car on a quilt. He then splashed the pile of bodies with gasoline, lit it on fire, and fled the scene. The murder weapon has never been found, so it's possible he disposed of it at some point during his trip down. The fire Brad lit was not very efficient and didn't really destroy any evidence. All it did was attract attention. The bodies were burned less than a mile or 1.5 kilometers from a fence that marked land owned by the CIA training facility. So if he hadn't burned the bodies, it's likely no one would have ever found them, as people are not supposed to venture that close to anything owned by the training facility. The most damning evidence that Brad was responsible for the murders was a sighting that occurred shortly after he burned the bodies. Brad drove to Jacksonville, North Carolina, and bought a new pair of shoes at a store near a military base. The store owner remembered Brad because he had a female companion that he said looked and sounded Caribbean, and the two had brought in Leo. Brad appeared well put together and was even wearing a suit, so he'd had a chance to get cleaned up since burning the bodies. The identity of the woman he was with remains a mystery. In addition to that sighting, Brad called an old friend in California twice during that first week, but his friend was not home both times, so whatever he wanted to say is yet another mystery. Brad's car was eventually discovered on March 18th near the Elkmont campground in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park in Tennessee. In the car, police found various blood-stained sheets and blankets, dog biscuits, a shotgun, a box of shells, and Brad's shaving kit. He had left behind various trail maps of the park, his suitcase of clothes, and his medication. Dogs were able to track his scent for about 300 yards on a nearby hiking trail before it vanished. Search and rescue officers and police combed the forest. Backpackers were warned away from the Appalachian Trail, and campers were told to be vigilant. Someone reported that they'd seen a man who looked like Brad in a visitor center near Elkmont, and the dogs hit on Brad's scent again, but the trail went cold in the parking lot. Dwight McCarter, a ranger who knows the Smokies extensively, helped with the search. Someone told him about a fresh grave they'd noticed off of a hiking trail, and when he went to investigate, he found a small grave covered with rocks with a cross made of sticks. The stones and sticks were being held
Okay.
together with a military paracord.
I've like boxed
McCarter
myself
didn't
into
dig
a
up the
corner
grave,
and
but
I
he
have to
wondered if it
like
had been Leo's.
climb out.
Another account says
I did
someone
not plan
reported
this
a lost
accordingly.
golden retriever roaming a hiking
But I
trail
needed to, like,
nearby, so Leo may have been set loose.
Crochet
The search
elsewhere
of the Smoky
today.
Mountains ended on March 26th.
see.
McCarter still thinks Bishop died in the Smokies, and he's not the only one. Had Brad killed himself in the dense forest or simply gotten lost, it's likely his body would never be found.
There we go.
As is to be expected of an international
All right.
mystery, there have been
Functioning
dozens, if
again.
not hundreds, of sightings and tips
Let's
called in
see.
over the years, but only a few that have been deemed credible.
I think it's 'cause,
In
like,
July
I'm
of
right by a
1978,
heater,
a Swedish
and it's
woman
just
who worked at the embassy with Brad in
cooking me in this
Ethiopia
corner.
thought she
It's
saw
killing
him
me.
twice during the same week wandering a park in Stockholm. Apparently, he had a beard and she felt like he was trying to follow her without being noticed.
Weird.
One of the other most famous sightings was also reported by one of Brad's co-workers and was even reenacted on Unsolved Mysteries. That man claimed he'd seen Brad in a bathroom and confronted him, but Brad escaped. That was later discredited when police discovered the man who reported it was caught making up false information to get media attention.
Really?
Ray Kite, the sheriff of Montgomery County,
asshole.
Maryland, decided to revive the case in the 90s. In 1992, on a whim, he decided to look up Brad's social security number on a credit bureau database to see if there were any new hits. He found that there was a man in Sacramento, California, who had been using Brad's social security number, but the man had passed away before the search, and pictures of him didn't have any kind of resemblance to Brad. That lead inspired Sheriff Kite to dig deeper, though. He assigned Deputy Robert Kiefer and Detective John Cady to go through the old files and see what they could turn up. In some of Brad's old mail, they found a letter that was sent to him from the federal penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, which instantly caught their attention. The letter was from Albert Kenneth Bankston, a bank robber and kidnapper who'd already managed to escape custody once. The letter was marked number 6 and referenced previous letters sent between Albert and Brad. The letter mentioned several spots near a lake in Columbia, very close to where the bodies were eventually burned. In the letter, Albert pointed Brad to a man named David Paul Allen and another man identified only as Sonny. Albert said both men might be able to help Brad with his problems and that they knew the area in North Carolina well. He also referenced that Brad had made some kind of inquiry in a previous letter and that the answer was that there was a woman in a North Carolina prison who might be able to help him. However, the letter was dated March 15th. After the murders had already happened and made the news. So it's possible Albert was just trying to pretend the two had a rapport so he could try and use the inside knowledge to get some kind of plea deal. Investigators had looked into the letter in 1976 and dismissed it because Albert wrote letters to pretty much anyone whose address he could...
What's going on? Come on. You can do it, YouTube. I believe in you. Oh, maybe you can't do it. What's going on? Why?
he could find that was even tangentially involved in the legal system or government. He sent out hundreds of letters and had pretended to have insider knowledge about cases before where his claims were eventually disproven. Albert Bankston had died in 1983, but Sheriff Kite wanted to try and talk to this Sonny person and David Paul Allen. The man known as Sonny was already in jail and admitted to having some kind of knowledge about murder plots arranged by the Aryan Brotherhood and the Dixie Mafia.
What?
However, Sonny said he didn't have anything to do with the alleged plot to kill the bishops, but if he had known something or been involved, it was against his code to kill children. David Paul Allen initially claimed that he was not directly involved, but that he did hear that someone had been paid $25,000 and some jewelry to help Brad kill his family. Apparently, Brad wanted to arrange for the murders to happen when he was on a business trip in Geneva between January 27th and February 6th. David would eventually confess to having some kind of direct knowledge of the plot and gave a bit more information. Apparently, Brad was hoping to have the murders go down while he was out of town to completely deflect suspicion that he was involved. After his family was killed, he was hoping to get a sympathy promotion to get his career back on track. He and Annette were...
But the longer you're in it, less likely you are to break it off, because what if it worked out?
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Scamfish presented by SocialCatfish.com.
There's been gifts too. I've sent her probably 6 boxes of nice stuff that she's wanted, that I've bought and sent her that she can't get over there. It's getting shelled really hard. She showed me a picture of her apartment, and I believe I saw the same or similar apartment with big holes in it.
On today's
planning Jeff's birthday party already, as it was on the 12th, so his little boy being killed just days before his birthday was meant to be extra tragic.
I had to stop it.
Brad
I was
said
having
that he
technical
would tell his
issues.
family that while he was away, he'd scheduled
my
some men
YouTube
to
was
come and do some
crashing.
work on the gutters.
For some
that
reason,
way, the family
this
would let the
laptop
men
is
inside.
just... It's not
Allegedly,
great.
2 men were hired for the
I need to
job
get
and decided instead to scam
something
Brad.
better.
They
I
took
don't
his
know.
money and jewelry and then vanished. The whole thing
We're
had
back.
supposedly been put together by a woman in jail in North Carolina. Police could never find the woman who is said to have arranged the whole thing. While he was on his ski trip, whether or not he'd
Okay,
actually
keep
been
plugging
planning
away.
to murder his family already, Brad certainly did not seem worried about them. He was openly courting and going on dates with another woman, and multiple people said that he and this woman were known to be promiscuous on business trips.
Can you hear it? You should be able
The
to...
hitman plot was never
is it me?
conclusively
No,
proven
okay,
or
that one is.
disproven either
Yeah,
way,
you should be able
and
to
in
hear.
any case, the validity of it didn't really bring investigators any closer to finding Brad. In 2012, Sheriff Ray Kite retired, but he and the new sheriff, Darren Popkin, would talk about the case occasionally. A new task force was eventually formed to keep the investigation alive. An informant with a Virginia motorcycle gang spoke with investigators in 2013 about an interesting theory that involved Brad having connections to a motorcycle gang. That source was someone living in the witness protection program who had always given reliable information to authorities.
Really?
The informant claimed he knew a woman who worked at the State Department with Brad who was having an affair with him.
Ooh.
Apparently, that same woman was involved with a motorcycle gang. After the murders,
What?
she helped Brad escape with the help of 2 other gang members, and Brad stayed at her place for a while in Falls Church, Virginia, near D.C. They hid
That
him until
literally
he had
sounds
documents
like
forged
something
to
out
leave
of a
the
movie.
country. Then they helped smuggle him out. That would have cost around $50,000,
Someone
but
call
was in the
Hollywood.
realm
This
of
is the most
services the gang
original idea that
provided.
they will
But where
will
Brad
heard
got the
within, like, a
money is a
decade.
mystery. He only left with $400 in traceable money. If that account is true, Brad may not have had money to barter with, but it's quite possible he could have paid his way by making false passports. Brad had access to the materials used to make new passports and could have stolen enough to trade passports that were as good as real in exchange for helping escape.
Well,
He also
that'd
still
be a
had his
good
own
job.
Foreign Service Officer passport and
Nice
could have
line of
fled the country
business.
before the bodies were identified. In April of 2014, Brad Bishop was added to the FBI's most wanted list to get publicity for the case. That brought in hundreds of new leads, the most promising of which was a possible connection to a John Doe who looked shockingly like Brad. In 1981, a homeless man had been hit by a car and killed on a rural highway in Alabama. He was
What?
buried as a John Doe, but his face bore an impressive resemblance to Brad Bishop. The connection was made when a local cop near where the man was killed posted his autopsy photo in an attempt to revive the case and find out who the man was. The man even had his hair and sideburns styled the same way Brad did. The body was exhumed and everyone was hopeful they might finally have answers, but the DNA results came back negative. Twice there were tips called in about men who looked remarkably like Brad acting suspicious, one in Mexico and one in Texas. Both men were arrested and both turned out to be hiding from the law, but for other reasons. One was wanted for mail fraud and the other an arsonist, and neither one had a surgical scar on their back. A promising lead came in from France when someone called in a tip on a man who looked like Brad coming out of a house owned by his uncle. It turned out to be Brad's cousin, who bore a strong resemblance to him. Those leads were just a small handful of the ones investigators followed over the decades since Brad vanished.
The crunching is so
Though
loud.
police have openly stated that they do believe Brad killed his family and it's considered a closed case, there's some who doubt that narrative. Some of his friends growing up have come forward to say that they don't believe he could have ever done something so violent. Some have even put forward the theory that Brad was a spy and his family was killed as revenge, and he was either kidnapped or killed at another location. To delve into that theory a bit, Brad's work listening to Yugoslavian radio broadcasts might technically constitute spy work, but that's a far cry from doing actual undercover work and really being considered a spy in the traditional sense. But there were all of his mysterious commendations and letters of praise that seemed to hint at more, so it's easy to see where that theory comes from. By the turn of the century, the country of Yugoslavia no longer existed and had broken up into several other countries. During the time Yugoslavia was a country, though, they had a secret police force known as the State Security Administration. That secret police force was active from the end of World War II up until 1991, when the country was about to officially separate. The secret police committed numerous high-profile assassinations during the Cold War, and their preferred method of killing was to bludgeon their victims with a hammer. Modern-day Montenegro has the bulk of the classified documents regarding the State Security Administration, but has not released them despite the other countries that were part of Yugoslavia largely declassifying their World War II and Cold War-era documents.
I mean, the CIA
Montenegro is still a very new nation, and the country's leaders have recently said they do not want to risk any kind of destabilization and do not currently have plans to declassify their documents.
The CIA
so if there
loves
is any kind of connection there,
like,
who knows if
South
or when
America,
more
don't mind if
details
I
will
do.
ever come out. It's certainly interesting that Brad's family was killed in the way that the spies he was working against favored. But some people have also put forward the theory that Brad himself was a spy working for the Soviets. His vacation to Yugoslavia so soon after he was assigned to spy on them is certainly strange, as is the fact that details on what exactly he did there are sparse. Also, during his time in Botswana, he received some kind of reprimand for unauthorized contact with the Soviets, but the details on that are vague. Why he would kill his family based on that narrative is unclear, though. Sheriff Kite has his own theories. He's openly speculated that Brad may have been involved to some degree in the CIA's MK-Ultra experiments. To give a brief overview, MK-Ultra was a series of secret operations conducted by the CIA from 1953 to 1973.
Crime scene photos.
Much of the documentation on those experiments has been destroyed. But in broad strokes, the experiments involved testing drugs and doing various psychological experiments on American citizens.
Sounds
Some of the
about
test subjects were
right.
in the military or worked directly for the CIA, and neither were signing up for testing. Others were prisoners or other vulnerable people who often had no idea they were being experimented on. Sheriff Kite leans towards Brad having been part of experimental drug trials, possibly involving LSD.
Global platform.
He thinks it's even possible Brad was on drugs when he killed his family. That theory hinges on Brad having been a CIA operative at the time of the experiments, though, and there are some hints that Brad would not have been an effective spy. Giving Brad a high-level position like the one he had in Botswana would go against standard protocol. Plus, he also had several write-ups for handling classified documents poorly. Sheriff Kite was hell-bent on proving a connection with the CIA when he was investigating the case, and even filed a few Freedom of Information Act requests over the years. The CIA eventually sent him a letter saying his request was denied and all other inquiries would be ignored.
That's
Some
funny.
of Kite's evidence was interesting,
Hi,
though.
Gus.
Allegedly, one of Brad's
Hello.
therapists said Brad was involved with the CIA. There was also a matchbook in Brad's desk at the State Department that had a phone number written in it from
How's
Langley,
this working
Virginia.
for you, bud?
Langley is the community on the outskirts of D.C. that houses the CIA headquarters, and people will often just say Langley as a code term for the CIA itself. Sheriff Kite also believed the FBI was involved. Apparently, in the early days of searching the Smokies, the FBI were working with the National Guard to block off certain areas from being searched. There's also the fact that for a time, the Albert Bankston letter vanished from the case file after the file had been checked out by someone claiming to work for the FBI, but who no one could identify. The FBI also apparently blocked Kite from investigating a lead he thought was promising in Spain. Much of that evidence, though, was provided solely by Kite and not substantiated much elsewhere. But Kite isn't the only one to point out the possible FBI involvement. Jean Wadsworth had lived next to the Bishops at one point and recounted a sighting she'd had in Basel, Switzerland in 1994. She was waiting on the platform and looked into a train about to depart and saw Brad. She said he noticed her look at him and shifted a newspaper he was reading up over his face. Then, when the train left the station, he set the paper down and appeared to be laughing. She reported that to the FBI, who said they would contact authorities in Basel,
None of
but
this
when later
sounds
contacted,
real.
Basel police said the FBI never spoke with them.
This all
Perhaps
sounds
the
super
strangest
made
but
up.
also
This sounds like a
hardest to
bad
prove
movie.
anecdote about potential government involvement came from a woman named Carolyn Banks. Carolyn was a successful fiction writer who wanted to make her debut in true crime by writing about Bradford Bishop, but her publisher would not greenlight a story without an ending, so she decided to just write a fiction book inspired by the case.
Yeah,
In
that's what
1980,
this whole
she
fucking
published
story
The
sounds
Dark
like.
Room
Is this
about
where
a
you got your
fictional
facts
William
from, bro?
Holland who killed his family in part because the CIA had used experimental drugs on him. Carolyn was open about the book being extremely inspired by the Bishop case during the book's release. Shortly after The Dark Room came out, a drifter showed up on her property. The man seemed nice enough and inquired about an outbuilding she had on her land. He asked if he could do some work around her land in exchange for housing in the outbuilding.
And she's
He
like,
only
yeah,
stayed for a week or
sure.
so, but was
Bro, that's a
friendly to
CIA
Carolyn and
agent,
befriended
and
her
you're about to be
son.
assassinated.
Then he said he needed to move on and asked her to drive him somewhere. He directed her to the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, got out and bid her farewell. Ray Kite has been the biggest proponent of all these conspiracies. In 1998, he even went on the Today Show to talk about it. He said, quote, "I can only surmise that Bishop had some help from very high-up people in the CIA, and they're very possibly hiding him out." However, it's important to keep in mind that while Kite presents
all
some
of this
compelling
sounds
evidence,
super
his
fake.
ideas also appear to be based somewhat on his disbelief that a man could slaughter his family in such a brutal way. He said to
you would
one
be
newspaper that Brad had to
woefully
be on drugs
surprised.
because, quote, "How else could you
Chris
go into
Watts
your house
literally
and bludgeon your
stomped on his
wife,
daughter's
children, and
corpse
mother?"
to get her into a hole.
But family annihilators are not uncommon. In fact, over 50% of all mass murder cases are familicide. Brad's own journals
I didn't know that
revealed a
statistic.
deeply unstable man. In the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, they still have Brad's wanted poster up as well as a bookshelf full of binders about the case. Kite has been retired for over a decade now, but says he still personally looks into any leads that come his way. If Brad Bishop is still alive, he would be approaching 90 years old.
Yeah.
He's since been taken off the FBI's most wanted list due to his age. But whether he's alive or dead, the fact that there's still a task force on the case and that new information is coming forward is promising. In September of 2021, the news broke that a long-lost daughter of Bradford Bishop was found. Her name is Kathy Gilchrist, and she would have been born during Bishop's time at Yale. She always knew she was adopted and decided to take a test through 23andMe to finally see if she could find anything about her birth family. Very little is known about the circumstances surrounding her birth, and her birth mother has since passed away. But the fact that Brad had a daughter no one knew about is intriguing and helped to reignite interest in the case. Perhaps as years or even decades pass, more information about whatever became of Brad Bishop after he slaughtered his family might come to light. Maybe as more Cold War era documents are declassified, we'll learn more about the mysterious part of his life. Or perhaps he started a new family somewhere, and more of his long-lost children will be found when his kids or grandchildren take a DNA test. Or maybe he ended things in the Smokies and a hiker will stumble...
Okay, maybe, what if, who knows. Anyways, that was... Ugh, I did not care for that one. I don't like all the speculation. I'm not a fan. Alright, let's see here. So, tidbit, a relative of mine was recently involved in an internet romance scam. Now, I won't go into too many details, but there's this show, and it's, what is it called? It's like a new Western. Oh my god. I don't know what it's fucking called. Outlaws? No. Is it Lone Star? That's some fucking Western show, though. I would never watch it. I hate Westerns. Let's see. What's that actor's name? God, I don't know names or places or things. Ew, block. Let's see. What is it called? What is it called? I wish I knew his name, but I don't. Something. God, it's none of these either. Fuck. It has this guy who, he's an actor who's been in a ton of big shows and movies. He's very well known. Maybe I have my dates wrong. Let's try 2022 Western TV show. Outer Range, no. She thought that she was talking. He's like a super young Yellowstone motherfucker. Stupid. Yellowstone cast. And she's in like her 70s. She thought that she was, none of these people look like who I'm looking for. This young guy who's married to like a Brazilian supermodel, and he like just had his second son. This is not the show I was looking for. Not even a little bit. Yellowstone, what is it? I don't know, fuck it, who cares? So she straight up, she told the whole family, she's like, yo, peace out. She unfriended everyone on Facebook. She even her grandkids, she was like, deuces, dude. And then she gave him like 10 grand, I think. Luckily she didn't have access to more money. But then she like moved out and she was leaving her husband. But then this actor, right, the scammer told her, well, I've just had my second son, so you would need to be their mother. And she was like, I ain't gonna be no mother. Like, what? No, like, fuck you and your kids. I'm out. And then she went back, and her husband has taken her back and shit. Yeah, no, it's fucking insane. So, yeah, I we're gonna watch this. We're gonna watch this because this lady's a piece of shit. Anyways, let's go.
This has been a long, hellish.
I love scams like that.
Over around 7 years.
I love scams like this. Okay, so maybe you'll know because you like shows like this. So who's that actor? He has like this crazy handlebar mustache. He's always played an old Western Southern man. Like that's his shtick. And I cannot think of what it is.
He does not, as far as I know,
I think it starts with an O.
Accent.
I don't know.
He does not have a Nigerian accent.
Is the show 1923? I don't think so.
Accent. He has none of that.
So he receives money all the time from this poor woman. Their operation has been stealing probably over $250,000 from this woman.
Colin! Oh my God! You just get out of the shower?
Jeff
This
Bridges?
episode is a roller coaster.
Is that who I'm
so
thinking
strap
of?
in and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But before we hop into it, we have a quick disclaimer. We just want to talk about some of the statements that Jody made. There's no excuse for the things that Jody said.
Yeah. I don't think it's Jeff
we were
Bridges.
Here to help someone, and unfortunately, things took a turn in the middle of our investigation.
No, it's not Jeff Bridges. It's the other one.
Represent us as a company.
Oh,
we wanted
is
to really
it?
let you guys know what this experience was
Sam.
like and help you, walk along the journey with us. So,
We hope you guys enjoy it, man. We worked really hard on this.
yeah, a lot of work has gone into this. Thank you guys. We appreciate you.
For those of you just joining us, we covered Jody's story on a previous episode of Scamfish.
Okay, my name is Jody Ebert. I happened to be on one night and this guy came on and wanted to chat. His name is Colin O'Connor.
She wanted us to verify a man by the name of Colin, who she had been communicating with for 7 years. This woman had to be the most manipulated victim we've ever dealt with. All of the information pointed back to this man being 100%.
You motherfucker, Sam Elliott. You bish. Alright, Sam Elliott. What's that fucking show he's on?
Talked to her for the first time in a year, and this
Western.
is what she had to say.
Going back to the
That's not how he
original
spells his
investigation we
name.
did, what were things that you
Where
were
is
not
it? Where
happy
is
with,
it?
just so that we understand?
The photo where he's kneeling by those signs, he said that was taken in Afghanistan. I noticed he looks young in that picture too, so it could have been at an earlier time when he was younger.
So I feel like we did come with enough information to prove that he was fake. But just for you, we'll go back and give you some more clarity.
I hope so. And will you go on camera also then when you get us together and apologize and do more thorough investigation on other catfishes that could have been
I want to find the actor that she thought that she was having a relationship with. Maybe it was Yellowstone, and I just...
If I'm right.
Okay,
Yellowstone
Alright, deal.
actor.
Alright, you guys. We knew we had to step it up a notch to get Jody to come to terms. How we were going to do that was still a bit unclear. It was hard to understand why she still believed this man
Luke
wasn't lying.
Grimes,
Our team went
motherfucker.
into
Okay,
this with an open
okay.
mind
Bear with me.
and decided
Bear
we
with me.
had to meet with Jody in person
This
to understand
motherfucker right
what
here.
exactly she saw that we did.
Okay.
So we flew her out to California from Nebraska so we can meet her face to face.
You'll land at 8:39 p.m. and then I will have a car
was
out
Yellowstone,
waiting for
I
you to
guess.
pick you up, okay?
Gus, lay down.
Alright, and then
You're being weird.
how are you gonna get food?
Yeah. So this is the guy that my relative thought that she was in a relationship with, and she was like, no, we went to get like Mexican food twice. He came and visited me. And I'm like, she has to be delusional. She has to be delusional to think that this man came and to the middle of nowhere. Like, she lives in nowhere. She's in her 70s.
But we couldn't. She had
And
no
she
bank
thinks
account,
that this
and she was
actor
banned
came
from
to
using
visit her
several financial institutions like
to get
Western
Mexican
Union
food.
and MoneyGram. The companies
it was
flagged her
Samuel
account
Elliott.
because they
Yeah.
also felt that she was being
But
scammed by Colin.
but yeah, the
Colin,
show,
if you
the
just
actor
let us
was
know when
Luke
you know and
Grimes,
stuff, just so we know
is
that
who she
everything's
thought she was
okay.
in a committed relationship
All right.
with.
Safe flight.
Is he on the list? Did I pass him?
So we
Oh,
will
there he is.
see what happens.
Duh.
The
Yeah.
next day, she arrived and landed
This is
in
who she was
California. We
apparently
met her at a hotel
dating,
a few miles from our office.
and who she was
Brienne
leaving her
Martin
husband
sat
for.
down with Jody to look through all of the
Yo, he was in
information she
I
had
never
on some
watched
old
50
phones
Shades of
and
Grey.
notepads
Me
she
acting
brought.
like I was
Our
like,
goal
what? I don't
was to
remember seeing
organize a
him. I
list
never
of names
watched it.
and addresses
I'ma
Jody
be
had either
honest.
sent.
But yeah, like my family started telling me about what happened, and I'm sitting there being like,
So the person
I've
that you
seen
sent
this
to
before.
the
Like,
party
it's one of my
he's known
favorite
as-
shows.
Well, right now he's known as
Yeah,
Sam.
like
He's never told me the
she's straight up.
official
Oh my
last
god.
Samuel's last name.
Insane. Just insane.
Is there someone else that's receiving
But yeah, I
money now?
love
it's
stuff
being
like
sent
this.
to a Sandra
It is
Burns.
bonkers to me. Because people will throw away their
This
entire
letter
families.
Here, this is from Janet.
They'll
correct?
throw all of it away for nobody at the end of the day.
So this is Janet, your dad's friend, helping you out till your dad returns home. One more week, then your dad until he comes home.
I think I was
Stay away
told
from
it
my
was kind of a
snacks.
mistake.
You're trouble.
How she did that, but
Yeah, you're trouble.
I have no idea. I tried asking him about it here a little more recently, and it sounds like it was
Oh
a
my god.
mix-up.
Hello.
So you weren't expecting to receive this.
Hi.
This is a random
I
note.
was expecting the money,
Go lay down,
but I
bud.
was not expecting that.
Jody was obviously in denial. She made excuses for calling through this whole interview. She brought several calendar notebooks
You
specifically
gotta lay down,
to
dude.
remind
Thank
her
you.
for when she needed to send money to
Unbelievable.
Colin.
So annoying.
These notebooks dated all the way back to 2016. She even had Colin's
What?
birthday and dates he told her that he would be coming back to the U.S. from Ghana. Honestly, we've dealt with countless
That is
victims
a
and have never
crazy
seen
time
anything quite like this.
to go
Like here,
like with being lied
January
to and like
2016,
still believing it.
calling $300. That's what approximately I was kind of sending him back then. It's kind of got
What?
that throughout the calendar until calling $500 March, and then 300, 500, and then I got like a total here of what I have sent so far.
Damn. She could pay my
I think-
rent.
And then I kind of
I'll be your Colin.
track.
At any point, did you feel that it was strange sending
She can ask
money
me
to
if
all
I
these
ate
different
today.
people that you never met?
He told me back then that he couldn't receive money because he didn't have the ID. And then he said he got to explaining it more later that you need a government
Yeah.
ID.
You just had to
receive
explain
money.
it to her and then it made perfect
completely,
sense.
fully, my life depending on it, trusted him. I hope for the best but expect the worst. And then I'm able to kind of myself mentally prepare. He's not coming. He's not coming.
Go gosh. You can lay on
Why
that
do I do
yarn.
this? He's not coming. He does not, as far as I know, have like a Ghana accent. He does
Girl.
not have a Nigerian accent. He does not have like an Indian accent. He has none of that.
Sometimes Colin needed more money than Jody could provide. She even thought about selling her mattress at one point.
What?
She went as far as
Girl, where
donating
were you gonna
plasma to help
sleep?
raise the money to get Colin home.
Okay,
But I
I've
did
never donated plasma. That shit looks like it
because things were
hurts.
so
I am too
rough,
scared.
and
'Cause
I was
I've been
sending
broke,
so
but
much money. I wanted
Not
some
selling
more
my
money.
body broke.
And we needed more money for me and my mother. But when I was doing it, the prices had gone up on how much you would get. And my size, I got the top dollar. I did do it for 3, 4 months, 5, 6, somewhere along in there, between 3 to 6 months.
I'll make a Fansly
Some of
before I
it
sell my
used
plasma.
for him to put with my other money, and hoping that he
I'm gonna
would
start a
get
cuddling
home.
company.
And as we are here
Only
now
cuddling.
today in 2022, he didn't.
I get to be Big Spoon.
I can see you have a lot of emotion. There's a lot of emotion invested in this.
There is a ton.
I feel like with the loneliness epidemic, as long as I got like
understands.
self-defense
I
stuff,
still say-
you know? Like,
And
don't get
I
me wrong,
always
what's
say-
poking you is my gun. But, you know,
Not
it's just to make sure that you, like, you know,
online
act
romances
correct.
are scams.
No weird
you guys
shit.
have pulled out a lot,
It's so risky.
and I appreciate that.
But it could be profitable. You know what?
But
That's
it
I need a
sounds like
pimp
the majority
who
of
is
them
gonna
come from
also come with
Tinder,
to the
Twitter,
cuddling session to make sure that
Play-a-Fish.
it's only cuddling.
We were able to
All right, I got
collect
this
a lot of
worked out.
names
I just
for
need to
our
find a
list.
pimp.
With all these money mules involved, we knew we had to reach out to our good friends Trilogy Media to do some footwork. They arrived and interviewed Jody
Trilogy
to give
Media?
even more details.
Yeah.
And a YouTube channel called Trilogy Media.
They do, like,
we've been around for about
so
6
much
years,
work.
And our main mission is like hunting scammers. Who paid for it?
I like the guys who hunt, like, the pred hunters and stuff. Although sometimes they do fumble the case. But most of them are pretty decent. There's one, Skeeter Johnson or something like that. But he's like, hey. Let him know, like, look in the camera and say you just got skeeted. It's just, I don't know why, it just gets me. It's so funny. It's like when King Cobra posts everywhere that he's a gay little wizard. It's funny, and I don't know why. I'm brain
They also will
broken.
be releasing their own version of this video.
I
the king
met
of the
him
wizard.
approximately in 2015. I had just kind of broken up with a guy. And
Man,
decided
this
to
lady
check out
pulls,
some
though. Like,
online
come
things. So I went with Match.com. Some other sites.
Actually, I'm
other
so happy to be
people
single.
More
Like,
down in New York City that were
my mom was
doctors,
complaining
lawyers,
to
you
me
know, very
about my dad
wealthy,
earlier, and I was just
they're
like,
not gonna be interested in me.
girl, like,
And a
I
lot of
could
them will back.
never. Like, good
I'm
for
sorry, I
you,
don't
but,
really
like,
believe in
damn, you
interracial
could leave
meetings.
him.
Swipe the other way on those. I didn't want to even try.
It's
I was
ridiculous.
on there for a while.
I would never tolerate what she
No,
tolerates.
No sex, no
Oh,
match,
no.
nothing.
Don't fall.
And then I just decided to go on one night, see what was going on, and he came on. He contacted me. He offered to video chat, and at the time I had no idea if, I think I knew my computer would do that, but I had no idea how to do it.
Boomer.
I'm the dummy there that said, no, never mind.
What was his excuse or request or his story that money all of a sudden started appearing?
Oh my
in
god,
the
my cat looks so cute right now.
I think he was still in
Fuck, he's
Afghanistan,
adorable. Okay.
and his son David
Gotta
had
watch
come
the show.
down with malaria. This was the
Malaria,
first big
damn.
money he wanted me to send $300. to help
Ooh,
with
that's how I
David's
started. Okay, can I just
hospital bill.
borrow? I
And
have malaria.
also
Can
by
I
that
borrow
time, I said, "You're in
$300?
the military. Use your insurance. Isn't David on your military insurance?"
No.
I think he said that they don't take
Yeah,
that
they don't
insurance.
accept
If 10
military
is-
insurance on military
is
bases.
100%
Everybody knows
real, he is
that.
your boyfriend, no question, and one is 100% a scam. Pick a number. Where are you right now? For yourself.
I cannot really say. I have to say maybe a 4 or a 5 both ways.
You.
He had
Delulu.
paid everything was ready to go. I tried
Delulu.
to check the weather earlier in the day over there. Any hint of rain. I couldn't pick up anything. I don't know if I was looking in the wrong spot. This was really hard. Floods. It floods the house. And he had these documents, gold documents, verifying on some
Gold
bonds he got.
documents?
Got.
You mean he has gold
Needless to
bars and
say,
he wants to give them all
those
to
documents were
you?
ruined that they could not read them, and he needed new documents. And then the barrage of delays and problems
Yep.
on getting the documents.
And then you have to pay all the
redone. He
fees
had
to get the
start
gold into the country, of
all over.
course.
And I
Everybody
think the
knows
price
that.
went up. He had to get those documents redone before he could fly. One of them actually has my name on it.
Have you seen
The
a
next
picture
guy I
of that?
talk to, I'm gonna love bomb them. Just out of fun.
50 kilograms.
Just to see how it
Have you seen a picture of
goes.
that with your name on it?
They're gonna be like, yeah, she's a
National
psycho.
Minerals Agency, certification of
Thank
regional
you.
and ownership.
I'm gonna be
This is
absolutely
certified that
insane.
Ownership is spelled wrong. Jody O'Connor is a bona fide owner of 50 kilograms or 23 carat, 96% purity of gold, origin of Ghana, by the part of the National Mineral Agency, under Minister of Mines and Mineral Resources.
Why didn't he trade the bars then to pay for his own luggage?
That's another long story.
Oh, well, let's hear it. We have all the time in the world, girlie.
Oh yeah, many times. I'm dying for you guys to hear him and everything. And the way he answers the phone, his laugh. Let me try a different number.
A different number? Girl, you don't even got your man's number? Like, how many phones does he have?
Doesn't have that number no more. It takes 2 showers. He must be in the shower, or he doesn't have minutes.
What? Like, that's not normal. And she's just like, yeah.
Colin! Oh my God! You just get out of the shower?
Send pics.
Oh my God!
Prove
it's so
it.
good to hear your voice. I'm here with some I'm here with some friends. Please talk to them.
She's insane, and I love it.
Hey Colin, how you doing? Hey, my name is Vlad. How you doing, Colin?
Yeah,
Oh, great.
That is such an African accent.
Ryan, we friends of Jody, and it's a group of people who love this woman so much. We cannot wait to see when you guys gonna get married. Like, when it's gonna happen? When you guys gonna meet? When you gonna finally come to America?
Yeah, I'm coming soon.
It's been way too long, right?
Yeah, I know.
Colin, would it be okay if we sent you a text? Like maybe we can arrange something really special for you two when you come. Like maybe.
Sorry, I gotta
we can
turn it
help
up.
And, like maybe even surprise Jody with something.
So Jody would not know. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's amazing.
We'll get your number from Jody. We'll send you a text if that's okay.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Do you have an approximate day when you're going to be landing here in America? When do you think it's going to happen? When the flood going to be over?
I think next week. Yeah.
Next week.
Next week. No more rain next week. Okay.
That's great.
That's amazing. So your documents okay? Did you get money from Jody for gold, for everything?
Yeah, it's okay. Everything's fine. Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
You got your tickets. How many luggages are you bringing? Because I want to bring like full of muscles, you know, like
we'll help you with the bags.
We want to help with the bags.
Definitely.
How many bags do you have?
Well, I have
Six.
Oh wow.
6. Beautiful. We're bringing 6 guys.
So Jody's still sending him money.
Are you still gonna have that 50 kilograms of gold for Jody with her name on it?
Oh my gosh, I do too. Yeah, I don't have a Discord.
Jody is happy.
That's great.
I might consider making one.
Would hurt Jody, right? You would never lie to Jody,
I'll have
right?
to. My friend, I got a friend coming over tomorrow. I'm gonna talk to her about making a Discord. Cause like
That's great.
most people
We're
who know
close to
me
her,
don't
and
know
if
that
we
I've been
found out that
streaming
she
just
was being
cause like
hurt, you know, it would
I don't
be
know.
a very
It's
big
weird.
problem for
I don't
you.
like the thought of people I know like that watching me. I don't know. It makes me uncomfy. But
Okay, we're gonna send you a text. Make sure the gold
but yeah, like
is
I
secured,
definitely like
and we're
I
gonna
don't
see
think
you
my
in
mom would
America,
get
okay?
it. But I might, because I want to see your progress, and I think it'd be fun for people to like share their projects with each other, and even like share patterns, because I download patterns and I put them all into my Google Drive, and I love it. Ooh.
Yeah,
And there's no way to really send pictures.
No, but they're not in bed yet?
Yeah.
Wow. Tell them hi. Hi, David.
Hi. Take care. Okay, I'm gonna.
I'll see about getting one made.
You're gonna text? Okay. I'll text you back later. I'm a little busy.
Okay.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
Love you.
All right.
See you next week. I better.
He ain't ever
Yeah,
coming,
love
girl. You
Love you too.
crazy.
Bye.
Love you.
Bye.
You motherfucker. He's just fucking with them. I love it.
Jody, that's an African accent.
Not from what I've heard.
It's an African accent.
It's not Italian.
That's
So,
not even
here's the
close
thing,
to
like, we talked
Italian.
yesterday, right? And you had how much?
Mamma mia. See, Jody,
$10.
that's
$10. So we
Italian.
flew you
That's
here,
a better Italian
bought you
accent than
dinner.
Chris Pratt
Like, you're
did in the
literally
entire
putting
Mario
him
movie.
over yourself. Like, you literally didn't have enough. Like, if we would have done that, you would not probably have not eaten dinner yesterday.
But if you came here
Yeah,
with $10
she's
in your
literally
account,
gave him
how did you
all
get
the
him
money
$500 last week?
to
Did you
her
have
name.
$510 in your account last week?
Insane. And she still sent him more
I'm
money.
asking, not judging. I'm just asking.
I'm judging.
I don't know if I really want to say. How did you send it to him if you can't use Western Union?
Gift cards.
I sent it to Salim.
Cash in a box?
Salim.
Okay.
FedEx.
Okay.
Supposed to send it to Colin. And as far as I know, he has been sending it.
Salim's a mule, huh?
No.
It looks like we may have found our main money mule. Jody has been sending money to Salim's house for years. When we first met Jody,
Oof.
we sent Colin.
I want my
over
relative to
track
be
his
at
IP,
Christmas, and I'm
it
just gonna
came back to
put up
New
one of
York.
these videos and be like, "Hey
Salim
guys, let's watch
also
this.
lives in
That'll
New York.
be a good
Salim
time."
is a friend, supposedly, of Colin's.
I'll just
that
stare at
he
her
knew
the entire
from
episode.
Texas.
Not breaking eye
He has been the
contact.
consistent also thread in this mesh of mess.
How old is he?
I'm not sure.
I know that you're not in interracial dating. What?
Yeah,
would
this
be
lady's
if you
racist
will
as
meet
fuck.
Your lovable person, and he will be
Yeah, what if he's the love of your life?
nationality, different skin color,
Like,
and he's not exactly
what's she
as
gonna
this picture.
do?
What would be that your reaction?
I don't know.
Using the tools on our website, socialcatfish.com, we were able to find out more information on this guy that's been accepting all of Jody's money. Trilogy Media will fly
These
to New
oatmeal
York
cookies
and
are like
attempt to
rocks.
confront Salim face to face.
Good God.
And you will not believe what happened.
He definitely works at that Domino's.
Yeah.
The money mule works at Domino's? Damn, bro.
I will do whatever the hell I want. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You gonna do anything?
Celine, you know what's going on here.
Huh?
You know what's going on here.
He is not military blonde blue-eyed 6'5" guy from America. Your boyfriend that you've been in a relationship, it's African guy.
After
1 month
everything that
later.
transpired with Trilogy Media and Salim in New York, we flew Jody back out to California and invited her to our office. With a mix
Man,
of
I
all
wanna
of
go
the
to
information
California.
that Trilogy was able to gather on Salim,
That's like one place
and
on my
all of the
list.
information that we pulled on Colin, we
I
felt
want to do
we
a bunch
had
of
good shot
hiking,
at getting
and then I
Jody
want to
to
work
come
my
to
way north
terms.
up to Washington,
First
do a
off, you
shitload
called
of
me
hiking there.
About 4 months ago, you called me out. You said we did a shitty job doing this, right? So we rallied the troops to do this.
So a big reason why we wanted Trilogy to go out there and talk to Salim.
This
was
lady's
to
kind
kinda
of a
show you
bitch.
who you've been sending
She was
money
like, "You did a
to,
bad
and
job."
Trilogy was thankfully able to document.
She just didn't
everything
like
for
the
us.
answer.
So we'll go ahead and just run through this, and then Art and Ashton will just kind of let you know what they experienced. So this is Salim's house.
Okay, right? We approach this in a similar way that we do when we're trying to locate money mules, which is we give the scammer a tracking number for a package they're expecting so that we can have the best chance of them being home when we show up when they're expecting a package.
I had Jody
Makes
overnight
sense.
a package to Salim. Jody contacted Colin to let him know that she was sending him and Celine a
And of
gift.
course, Jody's no
I
longer
made
paying
sure
for
that
like
there
any
was
of this.
no money in that package she was sending. I even had FedEx open up the package and send me photos of what was inside.
Yeah, Jody probably would have snuck money in.
For Salim, for Unit 3. Thank you.
So this first time we went to the door, we had a hell of a time getting anyone to tell us anything because, what was it, Salim's roommate?
Yeah, the first one, it was tall guy. He said like, I'm his roommate.
I'm looking for Salim.
What time did he go to work early? Do you know what time he's coming back? So he up to deliveries?
Yeah, the first one, it was tall guy. He said like, I'm his roommate, and he's at work right now. He's a truck driver. He's not at home.
He's a truck driver. I thought he worked at Domino's.
No, he's at Domino's.
Yeah.
That was a lie. He's not a truck driver.
Is the roommate actually
He said
Salim?
he's,
Why is he
he's
lying
driving a
for him
truck.
like that?
He's up to deliveries right now.
Let me call Drew.
He definitely works at that Domino's, bro.
Yeah. Well, that's our next.
Because when I called, he was like, the guy was like, he's not here right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like that could have even been Salim, though.
Yeah. We thought that he's working in pizza nearby, right?
So we went to his work, allegedly.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Hey, good
5,
morning.
6, 7,
Good,
8,
how are you?
9.
Good.
This
We're
does not
actually
look
looking
big
for
enough
our
to be
friend
the
Celine.
body.
Yes.
Yaddy, 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 yaddy. Like, what the fuck? Let me pull up my reference photo. Okay. Yeah, it does have kind of a little body.
They claimed to not know the real
Okay.
name of this person that they were referring to, but they said his nickname was Dumb Money.
That's not how workplaces work, though. Like,
Which is kind of interesting.
So you don't know if
That's-
he's working later or they have a schedule?
none of that seems legitimate.
So you don't
Like,
know his name? But does he work here?
Yes, I think it's the person that you're looking for, yes. Yeah.
After Trilogy left the pizza place and got into their car, they received a call from an unknown number.
Hello?
Hello?
Who is it?
This is Jody. I got a message to call this number that there are some people, I think in New York, that are surrounding a house.
Jody. This is
what the fuck, Jody?
This is
She's
Ashton
so
and
dumb.
Art. And Drew, remember? We met in LA.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm trying to find out what's going on in New York.
What happened? What did they tell you? Did Salim or Colin talk to you?
Colin called me quite pissed.
Quite pissed.
He's saying that there are some people that I sent a package yesterday. I guess I should not have done. I thought it was something innocent, and I gave a note to Celine to call Catfish, and I guess the
She tipped off Salim. She wasn't supposed to tip him off.
and I wonder what is going on.
It's us surrounding the house of the scammer. He's a cash mule. We are tracking that package down to confront Salim and figure out who he is.
And you're tipping him off.
To call this number, and
It's like she wants to be scammed.
to tell them to back off.
Well, have Colin call me directly because I will tell him what's up.
Hi. Hi,
I had
Catterbox.
asked you to arrange for Colin to call us.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, I'm okay. And you?
How you doing?
Get your ass out of my face.
I'm doing fantastic.
Fluff butt.
That's great. You remember me?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
Okay,
Arthur
1,
Nassman.
2, 3, 4,
Jody's
5,
friends.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, now we're close.
Remember you made a promise? You said that you will never ever take advantage of Jody.
And now they caught you taking advantage of this racist old woman who's desperate. Girl, if you're that desperate to give away your money, I will send you my
So, why don't you
Venmo.
do-
Like, damn.
How about let's do this? Let's hop over to WhatsApp and we'll do a little video talk, a little video chat.
Okay, I've been dealing with my son, and I don't understand.
I don't give two shits about your problems. Here's what's going on. Colin,
Oh,
listen,
there we go.
We know exactly
Time
what's
to
going on.
stuff
We know
this.
about you. We know about Salim. We know
Oh my
where
God, it's
everyone
so
lives.
far
We know
away.
you're scamming her. We know you're taking advantage of her.
Okay, it wasn't that far away. I'm just dramatic.
Shut your mouth for a second and listen. Your gig is up, okay?
I
The
don't
jig
like
is
how
up,
you
the news is
ran
out,
into
they
him and
finally
everything, and
found
it
you.
seems like you don't give him a chance to
lie again?
talk.
Yeah,
explain
she's like,
things.
you don't give him a chance to convince you of his lies. It's so rude of you.
You are a liar.
Hear him out.
You are a liar. You've been lying for 8 years. Okay, then
8
then video chat me right
years.
now. FaceTime us.
How much
On WhatsApp, call
money
me on video.
in total has this man gotten out of her? Damn.
Your son can wait. This is important. If you
Yeah,
don't
your son ain't shit because he's not real.
You have Colin.
Get in
I don't
there.
care what you have to say. Everything you say is horseshit. I want a video call from you in 1 hour. Because you're a piece of shit scammer.
Get him. Get
You're a
him.
piece of shit scammer. You got 1 hour, so TikTok, motherfucker.
Your boy?
I will do whatever the hell I want. What are you gonna do? What are you
Yeah,
gonna do?
what you gonna do?
You don't have to do anything.
You're gonna come to America to see
back to
Jody
the
to
house
tell me off? Like, for real, what
to
is he
try
gonna
again.
do?
And this time we got the landlord to answer the door. And we were upfront. We were honest about everything, why we were there. We're there to talk to Salim. She knew Salim very well. We said that he's expecting money from a Jody.
He's at work. But he didn't know a Jody.
She did not know Jody?
He did not. He doesn't know Jody. Yeah,
No, he does, yeah.
He does?
No, yeah,
All right.
he getting deliveries from Jody every single month.
Every month he's
Yeah.
getting, oh,
Yeah.
Jody.
Yeah, he knows Jody.
Oh, well.
Someone is lying to you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Are you on the phone with him?
Decrease again, and then single crochet.
Yes, yes you are. Can we talk to him, please? Please?
He don't know Jody Ebert.
We'll explain it.
We explain it to him. Can you put him on the speaker? Yes.
This is my fault. Okay.
I know, I'm sorry.
Quickly explain to
Yeah,
him.
really quickly, yes.
Okay,
Give us the number.
just listen. Hold on.
She actually called Salim. So we spoke to Salim. She called Salim on her phone while we're standing at the door. Salim claimed to have no idea who Jody was.
Okay.
He claimed that he was a truck driver. The manager had no idea why he was receiving cash.
Hi, Salim. We have a package here for a courier delivery that needs a signature. And it was overnighted, so it's supposed to be delivered right now.
Yeah, can you guys leave with my neighbor?
No, it needs to, it's specifically the sender
Yeah.
requested that you have to sign it.
We cannot live with anybody else besides you. What time are you coming back?
11:30ish, 12.
You'll be home at 12?
Yeah,
Because it's almost 12.
12 p.m.
Okay, where can we meet you then?
I'm a truck driver. I work in Jersey. And why you guys can't leave?
1, 2, 3, 4,
The
5,
sender
6.
specified that it needs, it's because there's, it looks like there's.
It looks like it looks like it's cash because it's got open in transit. So when there is cash involved, we need to get a signature.
Yeah, I can see 100 right there. But,
Yeah, there is more money inside.
I mean, but why is this person sending you money?
That's a good question. Do you know?
That is a great question, dear
We can come
landlord.
to you. We
1,
just have to get
2,
the package
3,
delivered by
4,
noon, or else we have to return it to
5.
sender.
Whoa. I don't think he's really a truck driver, though.
I mean, you don't know a Jody in California? Wow, who's sending you cash?
And she said, "Well, Salim, you don't know this lady. Why are you then accepting cash from her?"
I called Colin on that too.
So why would he lie?
I said, Colin, he may not know me, but he kind of knows of me.
No, he
How
didn't
does
know you.
he? What?
He
That
claimed
doesn't
no
make
responsibility
sense.
for that package whatsoever, even though it had his name on it.
Salim, you know what's going on here.
Huh?
You know what's going on here, don't you? You know what's in this package.
3.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this money that right now in this
4.
package, it's a stolen money.
So Salim, here's what's going to happen. We are going to be here in the area for a few hours if you want to meet and talk to us. Otherwise, we're taking this to the police and we're going to bring the FBI to your front door because we know exactly what you're doing. And we know where this money comes from. We know you receive it every month from Jody for the last 8 years. So cut the bullshit. Yes. Cut the bullshit, and we can either talk or we can go to the police, and they'll be back here very soon. Which one's it
Yeah.
gonna be?
Get him.
Okay, I don't need to be on camera.
Girl, you've been on
so
camera.
what is gonna be?
Are we gonna talk?
For how many? 3?
Okay, what's your phone number? Yeah, what
Yes.
is it? We'll text you. 646
Oh,
419?
dropped it.
Okay, we called that number earlier. No one answered.
No. I know you're not involved. No. Thank you, Salim. If you're not gonna show up in 30 to 60 minutes,
if you're not gonna answer my call, we're going to the police. All right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you, guys.
no, thank you.
If you would like, I can explain to you what's going on. If you want to hang up, and we can tell you, so you know what your tenant is doing.
I don't know.
You want to
Tell
know?
you.
I mean, she's just getting the money.
Yes, please.
Sure thing.
Exactly. Sure thing. He leaves.
Okay, go ahead with your information.
Okay, so this guy, Salim
Yeah, she wants the
Tadai,
tea.
is facilitating money.
She's acting
fraud
like she
and
don't want to know the
money
deeds,
laundering.
girl.
He is working with a scammer out of Africa, and he's stealing money from this lady named Jody for the last 8 years. This guy in Africa is pretending to be a guy named Colin in one of those romance scams, and Salim is his money mule. So Jody sends cash to him all the time from his social
Every
security
single
check,
month.
every month.
On the
And
4th.
we're here to find out. This is not we're not a courier service. We're here to talk to Salim about his crimes.
Okay.
We're from the media, so hopefully he'll talk to us. But I
We're
want just so
journalists,
you know,
independent
your tenant is is a criminal.
He's moving out.
Okay.
We're getting him out. Yeah.
So he receives money all the time from this poor woman, and we interviewed the woman a couple
She
months
lives in
ago.
Wisconsin.
She lives in Nebraska.
Nebraska. Yeah.
So yeah, their
Okay,
operation is stealing probably over
so-
$250,000 from this woman, and she's donating plasma to get more money to send. 'cause she
Okay,
thinks
so
she's
now
in
we're
a
on to the front legs.
So
it's a romance scam.
Romance scam.
Yep. So then he gave us his number.
Okay.
And we called him immediately after, and then later that day, and he disconnected his phone.
You said you don't believe in interracial relationship, right? Your boy,
That's
look
so
at you. Look at
fucking
him.
weird.
Look at general, blue eyes,
In
amazing
2024,
guy. Meanwhile,
the
since
edge
you
of
don't believe in
2025, and she's like, interracial marriage? No. That's so
you're sending to
yuck.
African American guy, not blue eyes guy, and that's why I lost my shit. But you're the one who don't believe in interracial relationship. His accent, his associate,
She's
everybody
trash.
from Africa. His roommate from fucking Africa. He has accent, Salim has accent, and your boy, Italian accent. No, it's an African, Ghana, Nigerian accent.
I haven't really detected any Nigerian accent.
Come on, Jody. Come on.
They've been in this business for a decade. And they know immediately when they heard the accent, oh, that's the dude is from Africa. We heard these as independent, nothing to do with them. We're like, oh, this dude from Africa. So everybody around you understanding the whole picture except you. Only you can fix this. We cannot convince you to anything.
And you've never seen him.
We're showing you Santa Claus is not real, and you're arguing with us. Like,
The accent part and some of this, I am seeing more.
The amount of pushback Jody was giving us just didn't make any sense. She had been sending Salim money for years, and he claimed he didn't even know who she was.
Insane.
And she still hasn't video chatted Colin. So we decided to hop into some of the information that we were able to pull.
we're just gonna go over some of the pictures because we have way more evidence.
This image has been found all over the internet. It's been used for many romance scams. This is the same exact document, same exact address. Here are using the same information. They're using the same templates, and they're just passing it around with each other. Did you have any questions about that?
Not yet.
Colin's using this man's image, but he's also using this.
I mean, a few Google searches, she should have
All
known.
of the photos that you've been sent are literally the same photo, which is that original one down there that's tagged. I think it's from about 15 years ago.
So if this was all real, why would he have to send him a
Holy
fake photo?
shit.
I don't know if he realized that I noticed it was fake.
Whether or not you noticed it, why would he do it at all?
I don't know. He was just trying to give me an updated photo, and I picked up on it because of some other things I have seen about pictures that look fixed. I don't know what happened.
He's literally just photoshopping his head onto other bodies.
I mean, have you ever sent a fake photo to somebody?
The photos, I have not been too sure until that photo. His other photos
What a
have
clown.
been fairly
Girl,
Every
you're a
single photo
clown.
he sent you is photoshopped from that photo.
That one don't look like it.
Look at his face. It's the exact
His face is in the same exact position and with the same exact hat.
That, to me, that don't mean anything. To me, that just means he likes that hat, and that's the angle of the photo.
Oh my God. So here's the tail, the legs, the body.
The amount of photoshopped photos.
And now we're
Jody
about to do the
received
legs
was
again.
absurd. In our first interview with Jody,
It's coming
Lane
along.
was able to find Colin's
coming
son
along.
David's photo on a stock website.
The original photo
I'm so stoked. I'm liking
It's a
this.
stock photo.
I'm liking this a
So
lot.
It's a stock photo that they would use in hospital clinic ads online. It would be used for drug advertising, different things like that, anything hospital related.
Girl fell in love with an ad.
More about video chatting, and he says he's going to do it. He has said before that when he goes to the airport, he has kind of showed me that Ghana is not a very caring, helpful country.
You haven't video chatted your boyfriend, and you don't even know what he looks like, other than the photo that you know is photoshopped.
I
How does that make
no
sense?
idea. I have no idea.
Jody, you've seen all this, right? We've
8
shown you the Photoshop.
years.
We've shown you the money mules. Salim is taking your money every single month. You haven't taken care of yourself. This person is lying to you. He's verbally abusive on the phone. We have proof that this is happening. This isn't a relationship that you're in. You're being taken advantage of, like, for the last 7.5, 8 years.
I think you're actually addicted to talking to him, addicted to having somebody need you, addicted to having somebody text you.
It's nice.
She's addicted to the shrivel of attention that he gives her to extract her money from her.
Jody, relationship can be without money. You can
She's
find
a sugar
another guy.
mama.
Why do you need to
She's a
continue
sugar mama.
dumping this paycheck to somebody else's pocket? That's called gigolo.
She's so generous.
You hire a guy who's dancing for you, but you don't even see his naked body. What is this? What is this? What
They're
kind of
so
freaking
mad at
relationship
her.
is
I
this?
love it. I love when they get
You
angry.
need a real friend. I bet the black guy at your church is real nice too.
I don't even like looking at him
Well, that's okay. I'm gonna.
because he's from Africa and everything, and it's.
Drew's in the room.
I've been
and
black
like,
the whole time.
and
What about Sean?
yeah, we got two black guys in here. Yeah.
Drew is
The audacity. Oh, is he one of the good ones? Say it. Say it, you bitch.
Every culture nationality has decent and undecent. People with accent, without accents. So skin color should not be even fucking in 2021 be part of this conversation.
Yeah, white people live in Africa. You idiot.
It is it. Because you're against African American people, but you are fucking sending for 8 years money to African American guy.
During some
Got
of
her.
this thing,
Get her.
I have been picking up more on his text and wondering about the language thing because he kept saying, don't go and talk to those guys who threat me. If you've been in the military 30-some years, how can you be making those kind of mistakes? How can you come back to the States, get called back to service, and forget an important...
So she's realizing that he's not white because
The real man
he's
in
not
these photos was
articulate.
not Colin. He is a man by the name
She's
of
so
General
racist.
Hank Taylor. He has nothing to do with this scam. His images were stolen to dupe Jody out of money.
This is Major General Hank Taylor. This is the man in the image that we had identified in the report.
Insane.
We began
Absolutely
insane.
insane.
Exactly 1 week ago today. Since then, we have rapidly deployed thousands of troops into Afghanistan. Our footprint continues today to stand at approximately 5,800 troops on the ground, continuing to provide and secure the Kabul airport to allow for evacuation operations. As you know, these troops were both pre-positioned in the CENTCOM AOR, as well as deployed from the United States. Then, as forces steadily flowed in, we successfully secured the Kabul airport. If you recall,
She's like, man, my man's so hot in a press
This
release.
has been a long hellish nightmare.
You're a nightmare.
Over around 7 years. He has called it a dream or journey. I have told him to quit it. It's not a journey. It's a nightmare. And that's how I've always been referring to it, is it's been a nightmare. Get
Oh,
your
you
butt
yelling over
home.
there, Guster?
You've had many opportunities.
Oh,
and you
yeller.
have not taken a single step.
Yeah, wasn't he supposed to be there last week?
I am getting finished. I am getting fed up. I'm at the end of my rope.
Bro, just walking all
Give
over me
a
like
few
this?
Weeks.
The disrespect. Hi. Hello. Oh my. Yeah, you have a hard life. Oh my god, how do you walk by and there's hair everywhere? You're disgusting. Go. Yeah. Lay down. Lay down, you menace. Jeez.
Thank you everyone for tuning in.
She's
Remember, all of our new videos go
crazy.
out every Wednesday. So
Bro,
please don't
get
forget
off
to
of
like,
me.
comment,
Okay,
and
you know
subscribe.
what?
Alright, Seekers.
You
We'll
know
see
what?
guys next time.
Ugh. Unbelievable. She is a nightmare. Like, that woman was unhinged. Absolutely insane. Don't you dare autoplay. I can't stand you, YouTube. So, scam fish. I love that shit. Alright, so I am going to wrap it up. And then I am going to look into making a Discord, because I do really want to be able to like share projects and stuff like that. I think it would be really fun to really cultivate that crafting community too. Share patterns, share like work in projects, completed projects. Absolutely. Because yeah, that's where I'm currently at too. Like, I really want to see it too, and I can't. I can just picture it though. So I will work on that. Absolutely. I will be chatting with my friend about it tomorrow, and she does a lot of moderation for not only like other YouTube channels. She does a lot of stuff. So I'll kind of like get the vibes from her. But I hope you have an awesome rest of your night. Thank you so much for hanging out. And yeah, I'll be updating that as soon as like I have some deets to share. I'll definitely get that on the channel page, and then I'll make an announcement as well. But I thank you so much for hanging out. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night, and keep working on those projects. It's going to be incredible when they're done. Before I turn everything off, I want to once again show off. Oh, no, not that. Ah! I'm losing control. There's too much happening. Where is it? This one. All right, the pretty background. I was like so stoked for it. No, you've been working. Yeah, exactly. I genuinely like don't expect you to be typing because we're crocheting. That's like the whole point. So not a problem at all. But yes, wow, 7. Jeez. Okay. I can't wait to see it. But yes, have a good night, and I will talk to you soon.